Here we go. What's up, everybody? Jarrett Roser here with Chance Hester, Louisiana versus all y'all, and Louisiana Football Report. Folks that are familiar with the Louisiana versus all y'all channel, I think, are familiar with what we do every postseason, kind of reacting to the football playoff brackets, which, as of this morning, Sunday, November 9th, are out. And so the path to the Superdome for 8 different divisions is all set. We've been looking forward to it, certainly, and looking forward to chatting. This is going to be our first time really looking at it in a particularly detailed fashion. We've both been tied up a bunch today, and so always appreciate chatting with Chance from a statewide perspective about these football teams and these football matchups. And we have another set of great ones that, again, I know we're all looking forward to. So, Chance, I'm going to share this link some more places on social media now that it's live, but your reaction initially to, just, hey, it's playoff time, mid-November, and the playoffs are about to start.
This was, to me, the fastest football season I've ever been a part of. I've been around the football game, as you know, my entire life. I went to my first game at 2 weeks old, the Shreveport City Championships, to see the Sunset Acres Indians, led by Jacob Hester, to bring home a city title. And I was about 2 weeks old. And ever since then, I've been around football ever since. And this was, I think it might have been because I personally was the busiest I've ever been in a season. And so it made it seem like it was the fastest. But man, the fact that it's playoffs feels insane. Like it feels like we were, chatting about jamborees and stuff yesterday. And now it's go time. And now it's, for, all but the few teams that are lucky enough to get a bye, like right now you're preparing with no guarantee of a next Sunday night of preparation. You know what I'm saying? So it's an exciting time of year. It's the best time of year. Nothing beats high school playoff football in Louisiana. And we've got another great slate of games. And then potential games are always the fun ones. What could we see in the quarterfinals? A lot of rematches on the horizon, potentially. And so it's going to be a lot of fun like it always is. And I'm just excited to see how it plays out.
Again, for folks that are, gradually tuning in as we ramp up here, we're going to go through the 8 different division brackets. We'll start with some of the smaller school brackets, the D4s up to the D1s, to wrap this up with the big dogs, the 5As and Division I schools. But I agree with everything you just said about the speed of this season. I feel like that's something I've heard countless people say the past couple of weeks from a variety of different directions, coaches, media, just other people associated with the game, parents. Every year for me, it feels kind of simultaneously like, man, it's flying, but also it's a little bit of a marathon, and it just kind of keeps coming. The games keep on coming, but this one, even more than most, I feel like has just felt so quick. And yeah, here we are now with, as you said, some great storylines. There are some teams that to start the year, we knew were going to be exceptional teams, and they're right there at the top of their brackets. We have some teams that maybe we expected some solid seasons from, but maybe still exceeded those expectations. Some teams that have their highest seeds in quite a while in their brackets, if not in some cases ever. And so there's plenty to talk about for sure. And I don't know that we'll get full scale into picking 8, our 8 champions. I think we probably need to look more at the full brackets, and I know we'll both be posting kind of our predictions later in the week and whatnot, but it's going to be hard as we get into some of these groups to not at least point to, man, this team would be tough to beat, or these are kind of the top tier of teams that we expect some combination of to be in New Orleans in mid-December.
Yeah, and especially when you because we always start at the Division IV level, and you and I talked a little bit before we hopped on live of just the usual suspects, but this year just the usual suspects, some of them kind of slid back a little bit ranking wise, and there's kind of some new faces, and so I love me, I played 2A football, I've coached 1A football, I got a ton of love for the smaller schools. Anybody that can take 30 guys out on a Friday night and go get a win is impressive. And so, just the outlook of Division IV feels like it might be shifting a little bit, on both sides, public and private. And so it's a great place to start. Gives the small schools some love, some schools that maybe don't get as much publicity. throughout the state, but we're going to talk about them in depth like we always do, and show some love and support for those Division IV squads.
I kind of caught the best of both worlds this week in Week 10 and went out to St. Edmund versus Westminster Christian on the Thursday night for what was essentially a de facto district championship game between those two. Saw Westminster get the win and, their first district championship in almost a decade. And then it was the first time I'd been to Westminster Christian's campus as well. It was great to stop by and see those guys, and then drove up to Monroe and got back to Bill Ruppel Stadium where Neville was hosting Alexandria on a field that I'd spent a ton of time when I was back up in Monroe and was there probably most Friday nights of any given season, and saw the two of the top 5A programs in the state, the Neville Tigers and Alexandria Trojans, square off. And when folks in Monroe were asking me where I had been on Thursday night, and I told them that 1A matchup of two schools they probably haven't paid a ton of attention to, they were a little bit surprised. But I love all of it, man. Like the opportunity to go see those that you mentioned, teams that maybe only have 30 guys, everybody's going both ways in 3 phases, battle it out and see who's going to outlast a 4-quarter war to do some great things for their programs. It's always a lot of fun. We'll get to Westminster and say to Eds and those guys in a second, but let's start on the non-select side and get into some of these brackets with the D4 non-selects as we typically do, just kind of reading off who those top seeds are. 4 buys as has been the case in recent seasons on the non-select side, and Haynesville is back there atop that bracket once again, undefeated, unanimous top 1A team in the LSWA polls through most of the season. Bottom half of that bracket, the Mangum Dragons are your 2 seed. The 3 seed, also on the bottom half of the bracket, the South Plaquemine Hurricanes, who were one of those somewhat Cinderella stories last season, getting back to the Dome for the first time in forever and getting over the hump against Haynesville to bring that state championship back to South Plaque. And then the 4 seed, Jeanerette, who has been such a fun ascendant program these last few years under Coach C.C. Paul. They're the 4 seed this year. And so a lot of folks will potentially have to go through Jeanerette on that half of the bracket. Anyone except for Haynesville would have to. Immediate thoughts on D4. Top 2 seeds or 2 North schools for the first time in a couple of years that they've swept the top 2 seeds, and everything could have to run through the North, but some really talented teams, some well-coached teams, some teams that get great community support.
Yeah, and that's the thing about, Division IV, football is just the community support, A place like Haynesville, there has been such a tradition of just excellence for so long at Haynesville. I've told you before, and I always mention it on air so I don't get in trouble, that my mom is a Haynesville alum. Going back to even her days, they've only had 2 coaches in the past 50 years. I mean, my mom, she went to school there with a Franklin as the head coach. And so, that tradition kind of like a Curtis North almost when it comes to the stability that they've had in the program with their coaches. No surprise to see Haynesville back at number 1. Really not even a surprise to see Mangum at 2. Mangum's been an incredibly solid team in the past, really in this, if you want to call it the split era. Mangum's had put together some really, really good teams in the past. I think we're in year 12 of the split, which is insane. Or maybe year 13, if I'm not mistaken.
2013 was the first year of it.
Yeah, so 13th season, as long as I've been coaching, there's been a split. So that's how I kind of remember it. Jeanerette had the one slip up this year to a really good Covenant Christian team in overtime, lost 21-18, which is my wife's alma mater, Covenant Christian. Have to check that box as well so I don't get in trouble. And then South Plaque, who, back on top as a 3 seed, state championship last year. They had been since, I believe, was it 2005 or 2006 was their last trip to the Dome, or last time they'd won it. It was right after Katrina, so 2006, 2007 maybe.
They had won in 2008, and then I think went in 2009 and were runners up.
Yes. All right. And so they get an opportunity to kind of get back on top, and now they're stringing together. They're coming off of a kind of a tough loss in week 10 to a really good Newman team, but they get the benefit of a bye week. Now some coaches would probably, after a loss, love to just turn it around and go play again and get the kinks out. But I'm sure those coaches down there in Burris are probably grateful maybe for a week off to kind of regroup, maybe self-scout, which I know every team with a bye this week, that's what they're doing. They're self-scouting. Like, hey, what are our tendencies? Where can maybe we be taken advantage of? And you almost, during the bye week, you almost try to game plan to beat yourself. Like, okay, if I was scheming up
Mm-hmm.
us, what would I do? All right. And you try to use that going forward to kind of have an idea of what your opponents might do to you later on. And so that's what these, you have the top four get a bye on the non select side, top eight get a bye on the select side. And all of those teams are basically doing the same thing this week, fundamental practices and self scouting. And so those four teams are all having that opportunity to do that. Now you have three of them coming off of wins, but South Plaque's coming off a loss. So this is going to be a really important week for them. Obviously against, losing against Newman is nothing to be ashamed of ever. But they're having an opportunity to kind of regroup and get ready to see what shakes out in that West St. Mary Bazille game and what's going to be coming their way, which either one of them's got a heck of a road trip ahead of them, regardless of who wins that 14-19 matchup.
West St. Mary gave Lurville a little bit of a scare this past week, and we talk about the Week 10 games for some of those top seeds. There are a lot of interesting outcomes around the state, and some we'll probably hit on over the course of these 8 brackets of just teams that are trying to shake off their, a loss, in some cases a first loss, versus teams that are springboarding into this postseason with some momentum. A couple of the other matchups of note that we'll be looking at this weekend. You mentioned Haynesville has only had 2 head coaches over the last however many decades, and both of them are last name Franklin, the father-son duo up there. And whenever Haynesville comes off of that bye, they'll be facing either a really familiar program in Homer, their rivals up there in the northwest quadrant of the state, or Franklin High, the Hornets, always talented and tough, a 17 seed that'll be up there against the Pelicans this week. Vinton and DeQuincy, one of those Week 10 games that have to turn right back around and play again to start the playoffs. Vinton really having to battle to hold off DeQuincy in a tight one-score game. And so an 8 versus 25 matchup in the seeds, particularly in Division 4, might not catch a lot of folks' attention, but that's 2 familiar district teams that are fresh off of a really hard-fought battle there in Week 10. I'm not going to go into all of them, but we talked a little bit about Mangum. There's a chance that a district rival that they had a battle with Faraday as a 10 seed would be someone they could run into in the quarters out of that great 2-2A district with Oak Grove and OCS. Mangum was able to split a district title with both of those other 2 schools, but Faraday was right in the thick of things and battling all 3 of them. And then I'm interested in East Feliciana as well as a 7 seed. But, I feel like most years in the split, we look at the first round of Division 4 and particularly Division 4 non-select and expect some lopsided games. And I'm sure there will be a couple here, but there are some more intriguing first round games in this bracket than I have felt in recent years to typically be the case for this group.
Yeah. And there's several, like you kind of led off with Homer and Franklin. If Homer's able to get that win, that is just another Homer Haynesville game. They've been playing for over 100 years at this point. It's the oldest rivalry in the state. And so every one of them Franklins that has ever coached at Haynesville has faced Homer a whole bunch. And Coach Richie Casey does a really good job. He was an elite player at Homer. Took him to the Dome not too long ago. All right. And was a great player at Louisiana Tech, does a tremendous job at his alma mater. You mentioned the Vinton DeQuincy rematch, which we're going to talk about a few of those today. Those Week 10 rematches. All right. But at the bottom of the bracket, the one you kind of touched on that I'm interested in is the potential of Mangum Faraday in the quarters. It's fun. All right. And it could very well happen. It wouldn't shock anybody. But the Faraday Trojans, if they get past the first round, they're going to have to go down to Clinton, Louisiana, and face a number 7 East Feliciana team. And as someone whose high school career was ended by the East Feliciana Tigers, I can tell you that going down to Clinton, that is a tough place to play, man. It's at the old Clinton High School. All right. Now it's a lot prettier of a facility now than it was now they've got turf and it's all beautiful now. But when I was there, there was no turf, and it was, half the lights didn't work, and man, Kendall Beckwith came out and at quarterback, and golly, it was a rough night for the Calvary Cavaliers. So that's going to be tough on Faraday. Like, nothing's changed, man. That is a tough environment. And East Feliciana, you talk about Mangum, like East Feliciana has turned into a consistent just program in the past few years. They obviously play in a very tough district with teams like Dunham and Episcopal in it. But in the same time, East Feliciana always holds their own in those games, and they're going to be hosting that second round matchup against Faraday. So nothing easy for the Faraday Trojans to get back to. They're going to have to earn that rematch with Mangum. It's not just going to happen for them. And I think that's probably the most interesting second round potential matchup is going to be that Faraday Eastvale game.
Yeah, I like that one a lot. Again, they've got to get through those first round games, but Eastvale and Faraday are both teams that I had at points early in this season or at different points in the season as, top 10 teams or right there, kind of bubble top 10 teams in their classification, in, that 2A classification, which is saying quite a bit. And so can't overlook any of them. Eastvale is a school that I haven't seen live in a few years, and I want to so badly. They've got some talented kids there. Had an eye on Ryan Moore. They call him Bug, who's just a three-phase difference maker for those guys. He was one of our Louisiana versus All Y'all Players of the Week. I don't remember which phase earlier this season because he did something in all three phases, but he was someone that we spotlighted. And Faraday, you talk about the challenges. They've played the second half of this season on the road because of having to deal with some improvements for their field where they were having some issues. The LHSAA said they had to clean some things up to be able to host there. And now they are going to have an opportunity in time for this playoff game to be back home. And so I imagine folks there are going to be super excited about that on Friday night. Should be a great atmosphere for that playoff opener at home, and then we'll kind of see what happens from there. As you mentioned, probably taking a road trip in round 2, and then once the games start happening, we'll see how some of these things shake out. Any more that you wanted to add on the non-select side before we get into some of those D4 select?
No, it's going to be fun. The top half of the bracket kind of looks set up pretty well for Haynesville, but I think that bottom half of the bracket is where you're going to see somebody really earn their trip to the Superdome.
Yeah, and we talked about South Plaque finally got back over the hump last year. Haynesville, as great as they are every year, is looking for its first state championship in over a decade, and they've been knocking at that door in the Dome the last couple of years, and so they're trying to see if they can go ahead and finish that job with their quarterback and just all-around standout Isaiah Washington, who's committed to LSU, another talented Golden Tornado team, just trying to get back on the right side of a state championship game. Will definitely be one of the storylines to watch as we get deeper into the postseason. On the select side, a team that we have not seen in the Dome, we have not seen, recently as a number 1 seed, but Westminster Christian is having kind of a dream season in a lot of ways. Its first district championship since 2016, its first undefeated regular season since 2010. They pulled their way through that District 5 1A, where there's so many great teams that we're going to be looking at all up and down this bracket, several on the top half of that bracket that could be a lot of rematches early on in this postseason. But the Crusaders, Coach Porter and company, take care of business throughout the regular season to earn that top seed, the first time in a while that it hasn't been, a VC or a Southern Lab or a Calvary when they were in that division, or an OCS. Riverside Academy is the 2 seed. 3 seed is Hamilton Christian, the highest seed that they've ever had as a program. This is, I don't know, this might be their first undefeated regular season, but they are one of the last undefeated teams around the state this year with Javon Vital Jr., the LSU target in 2027. The 4 seed Catholic Point Capee Hornets, the 5 seed Ascension Catholic Bulldogs, 6 seed Ascension Episcopal, 7 seed Ouachita Christian, a team that has been in the Dome a bunch in recent years, including the state runner-up run last year, and then the 8 seed Covenant Christian, who we talked about a little bit in the open. They've done a great job coming on strong the last couple of years, have another good team this year, and they get the last bye on the select side, which again has 8 byes in all 4 of the select brackets. And as we go through all those top ranked teams, I know we're about to talk about it, but you don't hear Southern Lab and Kentwood and Vermilion Catholic and some of those. We've seen in the past some of the top teams in the division potentially have to come out of a lower seed, and there's certainly potential for that again this year. But I think some of that also speaks to just the depth of this bracket overall.
Man, just glancing at the bracket, like going up and down, we talk about Louisiana versus all y'all. This bracket looks like District 5-1A versus all y'all. I mean, because, dude, you have the number 1 seed Westminster, the 16 seed Opelousas Catholic, the 9 seed St. Edmund, the 4 seed Catholic Point Capite, the 13 seed Sacred Heart, like all from that same district. And that district was a knockdown drag out. Like, if you look at Westminster's schedule, they're the 1 seed, they're undefeated. But, man, they had a 7-point win over Sacred Heart, a 2-point win over Opelousas Catholic. The St. Edmund game that you covered last week was very tight. Westminster gets a big touchdown at the end to kind of separate themselves. They beat Point Capite early in the season, 41-28, in a game that was back and forth early on. Like this district, it had a clear winner in the Westminster Crusaders, but it wasn't like they just ran through it. Like, this is a highly competitive district from top to bottom. And I think it shows in the fact that you have 5 top 16 seeds coming out of one bracket or one district. I'm sorry, and you look at the potential of a 116, which normally no one gets excited about a 116 matchup, but you could potentially have Westminster Christian hosting a team that they only beat by 2 points in the regular season. A team that's not used to being a 16 seed. We're used to seeing Opelousas Catholic much higher. And so now they're in a dangerous position to where they get another shot at the Crusaders. This much, obviously, with way more on the line this time. And so obviously District 5 sticks out. It's hard to ignore District 5. But I got to point to 2 things. One, the St. John Eagles, man, my wife is the volleyball coach at St. John. I worked there for 2 years. I have so much love in my heart for that place. They've had a really, really rough decade plus in football. Like, if you just call it what it is, 2016, 0-10, 2017, 0-10, they win, 3 or 4 games the following season, 2 games the next season. Things are not really even looking up. And then Kobe Minton comes to town, whose dad's obviously was a legendary coach, Tommy Minton, at Vanderbilt Catholic and Central Catholic and other places. He gets things rolling in a positive direction. He takes a really good job in Georgia at one of the top high schools in the country. And then he gets replaced by Brian Troxclair, who is a St. John alum, who comes over. He's an assistant at Zachary. He's a St. John alum. He takes the job. And it's been all just up since he comes on board. You hire a guy who's an alum, who was on some really good teams, who understands St. John's culture. Like, he understands what it means to only have maybe 30 kids dressed out. All right, like, is it an excuse, or are you going to go try to make it happen regardless? And so you have St. John this year, 7-3. Their only losses are to the 5 seed Ascension Catholic, the 3 seed Hamilton Christian, and they lost a 50-44 shootout against the 6 seed North Iberville on the non-select side. And they're hosting a playoff game. Jarrett, this is their first winning season in over 10 years. It's their first home playoff game in almost, I think, longer than that. And so, just the return of St. John football, for me personally, just because I have history there, my little girl goes to school at St. John. Like, it's a very special place to my family. And what they've been able to do this year and the years previous under Coach Minton and Coach Tro have been unbelievable. And then the other one is, like you said, some of those familiar faces that are kind of slid back in the rankings. Man, a 11 versus 22 Kentwood Vermilion Catholic matchup is kind of odd, man. Like, that's a quarterfinal most years when both teams are like in the top 10, Vermilion Catholic kind of had a rough 2025, if you're just being honest, based on what we're used to. Kentwood always plays some really tough teams early in the season. They play up in classification for basically their whole non-district schedule. They play teams like A. Meade and Jules Sumner over the years, different really tough teams from that area like Pine, So they maybe take a few lumps. And then obviously they have Southern Lab in district, who's the 10 seed this year. But that's an interesting one because, like, man, if you're Ascension Episcopal as the 6, you're probably expecting an easy matchup in round 2, but you're facing the winner of Kentwood and Vermilion Catholic, 2 teams that really have been there, done that, and know how to win. If I'm not mistaken, didn't Vermilion Catholic not win a state championship just in the past 2 years, maybe?
Yeah, VC got over the hump last year with John
Yeah,
Dartez and a great senior class.
they had that. Yeah, the quarterback who ran for what I wasn't keeping stats, but it seemed like about 1,000,000 yards in the state championship game. And so, yeah, so like obviously they take a step back. Still, I'm sure very, very dangerous. They're still going to be very well coached. And so Ascension Episcopal is looking at one of the tougher matchups in round 2, I think, of anybody in this bracket.
Yeah, we talk about some of the momentum dynamics, and I mean the ups and downs of VC have been so interesting because they start the season against a good non-district schedule and they start 1-4, but then we're able to kind of shake back as they get into district, and in an off week from that district 6-1A slate, they play against Opelousas Catholic, who was viewed this year as kind of one of the teams to monitor, not only out of that 5-1A, but on a statewide 1A level. And VC goes and gets a 50-15 win in week 8 against Opelousas Catholic. That was on the Louisiana versus all y'all statement wins, I believe. Just kind of said a lot for the Eagles, Coach Prejean and company, to say, hey, it's been a little bit bumpy of a start, but we're still here and capable of playing with anybody on a given night. And then a couple weeks later, they wrap up the regular season with a loss, not to Westminster of Opelousas that we talked about as the 1 seed, but Westminster of Lafayette, who is down there at the 20 seed. And so that, again, I think speaks to just some of the depth of this bracket, and having games like a Southern Lab Central Catholic and Kentwood Vermilion Catholic right off the bat. And then the potential in that second week of, like you mentioned, the one that would be out there in the Lafayette area, at Ascension Episcopal, or the potential of a Southern Lab versus OCS game that we look at as like typically an annual semifinal or final, would be a second round game this year. So very interesting the way a lot of this shapes up, with some of those potential 5-1A rematches on the top half that we talked a bunch about at the beginning, as well as some potential rematches of really big playoff games that are usually deeper playoff games that'll start a little bit earlier this time around. But and we say all this, we hadn't even talked about Riverside Academy, who I think is as likely a champion to come out of this thing as anyone, as the 2 seed. Just a lot of great teams to watch in the coming weeks.
Yeah, and like you're not looking over a Riverside. It's just like, hey, what can you really say about a team that showed all year how good they are already? I think the story on Riverside, 9-1. Yeah, they lose week 1 to Terrebonne, who, man, you talk about another tough district. I mean, Terrebonne, Thibodaux, Destrehan, like that ended up being a really fun district this year. You fall 1 early to Terrebonne. You go on the road to Newman and get a win. You beat a Prairieville squad that Prairieville win right now looks really good, because that is because Coach Schmidt, who's a local guy, Catholic High alum, came back from Colorado to become the first head coach in Prairieville history. He has those guys in the right direction. Like they're pointing up. And Riverside goes huge win over Vermilion Catholic, shutout win over St. Martin Episcopal, who another team who kind of took a step back. If you're a 1A school with the number 1 player in the state and he graduates, that's probably going to affect you a little bit. And then big win over Central Catholic. Like, the Rebels have just been rolling this year. I mean, they haven't really been challenged since week 3 against Prairieville. That was the last game that they had that wasn't decided by more than 4 touchdowns. And so, Riverside, they get the bye, potentially a rematch with St. Martin's, who you'd expect St. Martin's to be a little bit more prepped for the rematch, but you still expect Riverside to just, kind of roll through the early parts of the playoffs like they've done all season long. Now the quarterfinals, you're going to play a Southern Lab or a Ouachita Christian team, most likely, that have been there, done that. And to me, that's, man, if you get Riverside versus Lab or Riverside versus OCS, that is why Thanksgiving football exists, is games like that. And so whoever it is going to have to go down to reserve and that ain't easy. I can speak from experience. I've coached against Riverside, and that's going to be a really fun one as well. And this man, Riverside seems poised again for another really deep playoff run.
A lot of these teams haven't replaced some of those 2025 senior stars that graduated in May. You mentioned with John Dartes from Vermilion Catholic and his crew. St. Martin's obviously, adjusting to life without Harlan Berry, who's kind of scratching his way into that lineup for the LSU Tigers up here in Baton Rouge. Riverside's having to replace Dedrick Lasty, who's now at Nickel State, but they have a great core that was back. I shouted out Bug Moore for Eastfell in the non-select group. I'll give Boogie Johnson, Kendrick Johnson Jr. the shout out for Riverside, but Jaden Obikwe getting into the mix and becoming a handful in that backfield for Riverside. They've got talent at every level on both sides, every level on defense and all over the field on offense. Brock Bourgeois and company on that side of the ball. And so will be fun to watch that select bracket play out for sure. And as we kind of continue to head on up the enrollment size ladder into Division III on the non-select side, again, 4 buys on the non-select side, and they start with number 1 Gina, the Giants. Coach Jay Roark and company having another great season and still trying to get over that hump. They've been kind of pushing it farther and farther into the playoffs in recent years, trying to bring that thing to the Dome and bring that community down to Poydras Street here in December. They lead off the bracket, and that'll obviously be a big storyline, is just can Gina get over that hump. The bottom half, the 2 seed is your reigning champion in Sterlington. The 3 seed is your runner-up from last year in St. James. The runner-up the past 2 years, the St. James Wildcats. They lead off the bottom half of that bracket, 2 teams that have been viewed as sort of the favorites in this division from preseason on, and will be chief contenders against number 1 Gina and others in here, including number 4 Kinder, who gets the 4th and final bye in the Division III non-select bracket. I know, like me, for you, Gina, St. James, and Sterlington are 3 that are going to stand out, but what else kind of pops off the page with D3 non-select?
Really quick, 2-second soapbox. Jay Roark doesn't get talked about enough for being one of the absolute best football coaches in the state of Louisiana. Not to harp on the 1 seed, I think they kind of speak for themselves. But he does not get talked about enough. In my coach to coach, I think Jay Roark does not get talked about enough. The work he does at Gina is unbelievable. Him and his staff, they're in it every single year. They're the 1 seed this year. You're looking at them as a 9-1. Their only loss comes from going up in classification to a Tioga team that right now, that's a really good team to have played. Tioga is, a top 10 seed in the Division I select bracket, and they put a whole lot of points on a whole lot of people. And so just really quick, I couldn't pass by the 1 seed Gina without talking about Jay Roark and the work he does. But some of the ones that stick out to me, man, the Mansfield Wolverines are back on top, having a really, really good year, 8-2. Their only losses come from going up in class to play Northwood, and they go and play Lake Charles Prep, who, pound for pound, Lake Charles Prep looks like one of the better teams in the state. Had that hilariously entertaining shootout with Barb earlier in the year. And so, they rolled through their district. Over Winfield, who had a really good season in the regular season with a win over the Manny Tigers. And, man, Mansfield back in the top 10, a place they haven't been in a while. And they're going to have a rematch with Winfield, who they just beat a few weeks ago in the first round, 8-25. You see a lot of that early on. St. James and Sterlington there at the bottom of the bracket. Obviously the usual suspects, but, man, you don't want to count anybody out. You don't want to look ahead too far, but man, Thanksgiving, this sentence, tell me this isn't the most beautiful sentence you've ever heard. Thanksgiving week, Oak Grove versus St. James.
Yeah.
Man, that's just why that's why we do this. That is why coaches and kids and people like you and me that just enjoy watching the sport, this is why we get out of bed in the morning, is Oak Grove going down to beautiful downtown Vacherie on the day after Thanksgiving. Now, granted, Oak Grove's got to get through Port Allen. They got to get through the Richwood Caldwell Parish winner, and so like it ain't a clear path, but it's hard to not like get excited about the potential of what that could be. North versus South, two teams that are separated by a whole lot of miles. Having an opportunity to mix it up Thanksgiving week. But, man, I think the team that stands out to me, like I mentioned before, is just the Mansfield Wolverines. Like, they're just in such a good place in the program, headed in the right direction. That 2A district that they're in looks a lot different now than it did, 5 years ago when you had a Calvary Baptist in that district. Now you have, Red River and Winfield and Lakeside. And so now it's like more of a true 2A district that Mansfield has an opportunity to sit atop of for a while if they can keep playing at a high level. But they got to get past a Winfield team that that they've seen before. All right, that in a shootout, 56-32, that happened just 2 weeks ago. But yeah, that Mansfield team stands out to me because I'm just excited as a North Louisiana guy to see them kind of getting their program back on the right track.
We talk so much, I guess. I mean, we're not harping on them right now, but Gina, Sterlington, and St. James, I know for most of us are going to be considered kind of that top tier of contenders in this group. But then right there, Kinder is the 4 seed, EREF is the 5 seed, are the two teams that have navigated their respective regular season schedules undefeated. A couple of the final remaining undefeated teams around the state, I think it's 11 that completed the regular season undefeated, and that includes Young Audience's charter, which played 7 games and still kind of in their ramp-up process as an LHSAA member. So 10 teams in the playoffs with undefeated records, and 2 of them are right there as the 4 and 5 seed in Division III non-select. And we talked some about that great District 2A up in the northeast quadrant of the state with Mangum and Faraday and OCS, and that Oak Grove team that you mentioned got a huge win on Thursday night to host OCS and send kind of a message, just like we talked about some with VC in that Opelousas Catholic game of essentially, yeah, it's great. We're a little bit overlooked this year for Oak Grove. Jackson Bradley and company graduated in May or, during the course of last school year. And so they started off this year with a loss to Calvary. They had a district loss earlier on in district against Mangum, their first district loss in a couple of years, but Oak Grove showing in week 10, they are still very much a force to be reckoned with. And it'll be fun to watch them as they get into this bracket. Some really good matchups to look forward to. Another one that we haven't talked about yet that stands out to me, 15 Donaldsonville and 18 Westlake. 2 teams separated by a good bit. Westlake and 2027 quarterback Brody Anderson and company will head out here through Baton Rouge down to Donaldsonville, where Snoop Green is one of the fantastic productive edge rushers around the state this season, doing some good things for his Tigers, but a lot of fun in Division III non-select.
Yeah, and like you said, that Donaldsonville team, plays in a tough district, really tough district. They're kind of the forgotten Ascension Parish team a little bit, obviously because they're not as big as the EAs and the Dutch Towns and those like that, being in 2A. But man, Donaldsonville this year, starts off the season with a huge win over Assumption. They go up in classification, get a 3-score win against Assumption. They lose to a Bruley team, 21-7, which, surprise of everyone, that's a 9-1 Bruley team. All right, and they did that on the road. Hung with went up in classification, 2 classes to Class 4A. There's a reason that Bruley got has a nice road laid out for them in the playoffs. They go and get a win at East Feliciana, a team that you and I just sung the praises of just a few minutes ago. Now they run into St. James. They have to go to Vacherie, and they kind of get thrown around a little bit, which that happens to a lot of teams. And then they drop a tough one against Patterson at the end of the year in district, maybe one that kind of surprised them a little bit, maybe one that, the Lumberjacks kind of caught them at the right time. But now going into a matchup with Westlake, they're getting to host, like you said, Westlake's got to come to Donaldsonville. Coach Lee does an incredible job. And the Donaldsonville Tigers are going to be a tough out, man. Even being 15-18, which 15-18s can really go either way. But it's going to be tough on the Westlake Rams. It's going to Donaldsonville. It's a beautiful field down there, beautiful facility. Coach Lee, like I said, does a great job. Donaldsonville has played really good teams this year. They're tested, and they're gonna be ready for the challenge.
Let's move on to D3 Select and just setting that stage a little bit. Again, 8 teams that have buys, and it starts with Lafayette Christian back atop the bracket for the first time in a few years. Obviously, we're up in Division II for a couple years there, and then had a little bit of an up and down year last year with some turmoil. Kind of got hot though late, but then lost a kind of chaotic one on Thanksgiving week against Dunham. LCA has been fantastic all year. They let one get away from them in non-district to Archbishop Shaw, but that was a non-district slate of all really good 4A and 5A teams. They had another non-district game against 5A Evangel late in the season, and they have just been kind of rolling through most of that schedule. And in some of those tougher games, they edge out Archbishop Brummel. They edge out Central of Baton Rouge, a reigning champion. They hold Pop Houston and company to 22 points and get a 24-22 win late in the season. They got a big win against the number 2 seed, Notre Dame. The Pios, that same district, claims the top 2 seeds in Division III Select. And continuing on down the list, number 3, Jewel Sumner, undefeated out there in Kentwood. The 4 seed, Isadore Newman Greenies, their first year under Aaron Weiss. Jake Randall, Will Randall's younger brother, taking over at quarterback this year. They started 0-2 and have rolled off a bunch of wins since then to earn a high seed in this bracket. That Dunham team I talked about a second ago, Elijah Haven and company, really good senior and junior class is kind of leading the way for those guys. 6, Calvary Baptist, who, I know we'll talk a bunch about, as we always do in Division III Select. Lafayette Renaissance Charter with another nice step forward for a young program is the 7 seed and a first-round bye, and the 8th seeded Bunkie Panthers, after graduating some fantastic, a legendary senior class for them this past year that got them back into deeper playoff rounds than they had been since the late 80s. Bunkie is right there with Zion Lee and company, still a first-round bye, still a really high seed in this Division III Select bracket.
Yeah, man. God, LCA is just so good. Like, it's just like, that's the only way to put it. Like, they're just such a good football team this year. Like, well, I say this year, every year. Like, but man, like, I want to go back real quick to what you mentioned. So they play Evangel a few weeks ago. They hold them to 22 points. All right, Pop Houston, obviously committed to LSU. A major recruit, an exciting player. Knows how to throw the ball from a 9-yard shotgun better than anybody else. So I'm gonna read off some numbers to you to back me up here. Evangel has only been held under 5 touchdowns once the whole season, and it was LCA. They scored, going from week 1 until they played LCA, 32, 63, 43, 51, 62, 71, 59, 64, and then 22 against LCA. And then they finish against the 9-1 Parkway team with 55. Like, LCA has been known throughout the years for, obviously, Juwan Johnson, all-time yardage leader in football history, basically in high school. But this year, like, the LCA defense needs to get some love, man. Like, the ability to keep Pop under wraps like that, nobody's done it. Like, even Neville gave up 32 to him, and Neville looks primed to make another run to the Superdome this year, coming out of that District 2 5A. All right, and so, briefly touch on Lafayette Christian. God, you could talk about them for days. But going through the rest of the bracket, man, really good first year for Devin Ducote at Parkview Baptist. He's a Parkview alum. They could hire 10 coaches, and they hit it out of the park with Coach Ducote. You know what I'm saying? Defensive minded, but more than anything else, he's culture minded. They have shirts, old school, new soul that they're wearing this year. And I just think that fits it to a T, man. Like, he's bringing in a lot of what Parkview is known for, what made Parkview special, with just a little bit of a new flavor to it, putting his own spin on things. You look at the history of Parkview, Anthony Camp and David Semino and Devin Ducote, and then Matt Shelton, who's the athletic director at Catholic High. all Parkview alums, all have done incredible things in coaching. There's like a toughness that comes from being a Parkview Eagle, and I think Coach Cody's done a really good job in year one of trying to reestablish that. Him and his staff have done a great job. They're going to be hosting, obviously, a Darbone Woods Charter Timberwolves squad coming all the way down from Farmerville. That's a really tough travel. If you go down, Dunham being the 5 seed, led by Elijah Haven, who, a quarterback that we're still kind of waiting to see where he makes his decision, where he's going to end up. Unless I missed a commitment. They happen so fast and the furious, but I think he's still kind of weighing some options. Just an incredible athlete, obviously. Looks like an NFL quarterback body-wise. Coach Weiner is another coach that does not get talked about enough of how good of a job he does every single year with Dunham. And then you go down, obviously, Newman's right back in the conversation. No surprise there. Jules Sumner, top 3 seed. That's a really tough place to go play. I've done it as a coach with West Louisiana a few years ago. Their stadium, I don't know if you've ever been to Sumner, all right, but their stadium is like a big bowl, and it's a really kind of cool atmosphere. And so Slaughter Charter or Pope John Paul is going to have to make that trip in round 2 and that stuff. This is honestly the first year that I don't really know anything about Calvary. I know that's so hard to imagine with me being an alum, and I always kind of know the scoop on those guys. But my oldest brother Adam is now the athletic director at Providence Classical Academy in Bossier. He's doing incredible things with a brand new school. And so my Calvary people have all kind of moved on. But as an alum, I know what you're going to get when you play them. You're going to get a high-scoring offense. You're going to get a defense that loves to hit. Obviously, with Mark Miller being there, that's always going to be the case on defense. They've obviously been battle-tested. They go out and play the Nevilles and play the Franklin Parishes and play the Oak Groves because they know they have to get ready for, maybe a quarterfinal matchup at Jules Sumner. And then at the bottom of the bracket, further down, man, the scariest 7 seed in the history of football, man. That Lafayette Renaissance Academy they're scary already, and they ain't even been around that long, man. I've watched them in sub-varsity this year put a whooping on people. Like, they got some really good kids coming through the pipeline. The staff, a couple of guys, obviously, that were formerly of Lafayette Christian. Now, basically, if I'm not mistaken, almost like across the street at Lafayette Renaissance Charter. Like, I want to say they're pretty close together.
They're right around the block, basically.
Yeah, and, the 7 seed already. Obviously playing a really tough district with Lafayette Christian and Notre Dame, but are making waves early. Now they're going to have a really tough matchup if they have to host Amite in the second round. But potential for a rematch with Louis Cook and the Notre Dame Pioneers, and they're in the quarterfinals. And it's hard to beat a good team twice, as I think is basically every coach in the world would tell you.
Those teams you mentioned, LRCA and Amite, the 7 and 10, just like as we mentioned in another bracket, 7 and 10 being 2 of kind of the lower seeds that I think are interesting to watch in this group. I went ahead and made sure to get the text over to Mark Miller to make sure the check clears, that you get your whatever the check is for the Mark Miller mention. And that Calvary defense is something that I know they have been really confident in going into this season. The offense, I think, has come along as well. They've got a guy that I had known more as a younger guy on the defensive side of the ball in Braylon Huglon that has become one of the more explosive weapons in the state for the Cavs. But that defense is out there, ready to compete with anyone at any level. I think you mentioned having played some of those upper classification games, battling Neville for a while until just, a couple plays here and there, and some of the depth of the Neville Tigers as a 5A kind of weighed on that thing. But Mark's son, Luke Miller, we talked in recent years about Cole Miller, who's now graduated and getting into the photography game over at ULM. Luke is now the senior. And I started last year as a junior calling him Cannonball with the way he was kind of getting downhill and just blowing things up. Crashing down from his safety spot. I think he's the leading tackler for that team again, and kind of epitomizes some of what they're about this year. But they're a team that has had a chip on their shoulder, because this wasn't kind of the Calvary team that everyone was talking about, like has been the case in recent years. And they've come out and had a 9-1 regular season with just that loss to Neville against them. And I think go into this bracket feeling like they can play with anyone in this bracket, as much as we're all talking about the LCAs and Notre Dame a 2 seed and Dunham with Elijah Haven and company. Calvary feels like they're right there in that mix. And, not having a bye in the first round, Catholic New Iberia, a team that surprised a bunch of folks last year, making a run and winning a state championship. They had some turnover from that roster, but still some great pieces there. A couple of fantastic receiver DB athletes that are on that team that can, look the part anywhere in the state that you would want to put them. And so this is a bracket that I think we've both looked forward to a lot in recent years, and this year is no different.
Yeah, man. You talk about another team that's just year in, year out, just so hard to beat in Catholic New Iberia, man. Like, when I think Catholic New Iberia, I think of, 2013 as a young assistant at Calvary, going down there for a semifinal, getting a 1-point win over Jason Pellegrin at quarterback, playing them the next year in the Dome and winning by 3. Like, and the way that they've been able to just stay so consistent. Even as a 9 seed, man, like, they're dangerous. Like, Bunky's going to have their hands full if that's the matchup in the second round. The way that they run the football just so consistently every year. They've got 2 losses to their name. They lose to a Lorville team, which we'll talk about, a Lorville team that's very, very good, who another just very consistent program. And then you have a 1-point loss to Notre Dame, who's that's been one of the kind of rivalries, I think, in the last, 7 or 8 years that doesn't get talked about enough, is how many great Notre Dame Catholic New Iberia games there have been, like in state championships or otherwise. Those 2 teams are always, kind of just bringing it to each other. And, Notre Dame ekes out a 1-point win. They get a win over Lake Charles Prep, who obviously we've talked a little bit about, who's obviously had a really good season as well. And so the Panthers of Catholic and New Iberia, man, they're a scary team. And like, it's a team that Lafayette Christian's got to be very aware of in a potential quarterfinal matchup.
That Notre Dame and Catholic game, I'm trying to pull it up, but Catholic was up in that game 28-0, I believe. And then Notre Dame had to roar back and take it to overtime and pull out the 35-34 win, which is a heartbreaker for Catholic, and obviously swings a couple things. If that one goes a little differently, they're potentially looking at a first round bye, and Notre Dame is maybe not the 2 seed, but instead this is the way it shakes out. And so Catholic will be playing Glen Oaks on Friday, and with a win would head to Bunky. Notre Dame, meanwhile, gets to send its entire half of the bracket through Crowley, as long as they can take care of their business. But some great games that are going to start pretty early on in this bracket. Another team to mention kind of briefly, Country Day down there at the 11 seed has some great multi-sport athletes, including Deuce McAllister's son, who is going to be an interesting wide receiver to watch kind of growing up in these next couple of years. Someone that I know LSU and some others are pretty closely monitoring his development as a long athletic pass catcher, which obviously is, a prototype that can have a lot of success on Saturdays and beyond.
Yeah, man. And if I'm not mistaken, doesn't Deuce's son, he plays basketball too, doesn't he?
Yeah, he had, I don't remember what it was in the state tournament last year, but he had a huge shot or a huge play or something in a tight game there. He's pretty talented in multiple sports.
I want to say it might have been to sink my Cavaliers late in the playoffs. But so I remember the name, obviously. Yeah. And so that bracket's going to be fun, man. It's always so competitive. Obviously you have the teams that you always talk about, but but the new faces are the ones to kind of watch. Like, obviously Bunky being a top 8 seed, Sumner being a top 3, which is huge for that program. And then like a new face in Lafayette Renaissance, which if LCA's foundation taught us anything, we should know that Renaissance isn't going anywhere for a long time. They're going to be a force to be reckoned with in that district over the next few years. If it sticks together with LCA, Lafayette Renaissance, Notre Dame, like all in the same district, like you're talking about a bloodbath trying to win that district and eke out playoff seeding against each other.
Yeah, Renaissance has Hunter Landry, Trev Falk, Reggie Williams, all those guys that are over there that were so critical in taking that Knights program at LCA to a next level. And yeah, I mean, again, D3 select, great. For folks that want to make sure to keep an eye on Deuce's son down there at Country Day, it's Curtis McAllister, still a 2028 kid, just a sophomore this year, already doing huge things for the Cajuns on both the basketball court and the football field, and someone we're going to be talking about in that 28 class for years to come. Moving up to D2 non-select, North DeSoto, Coach Dunn and company with the Griffins, the 1 seed, Luke Delafield, the Northwestern State committed quarterback, Kenny Thomas, the Louisiana Tech committed running back, another fantastic Griffins team trying to get back to the state championship game where they were for the first time in school history when Luke and company were freshmen a few years ago, want to get back and complete that mission. Iowa Yellow Jackets, one of those schools that, like some others we've talked about, has on a statewide level, kind of quietly been there knocking at the door for a while. Under Coach Johns, those guys have done a great job of being one of the top contenders in their bracket every year and making some deep playoff runs. And they're just trying to get over that hump and push that thing to New Orleans for the first time. Bell Chase is a 3 seed, has had a heck of a season this year. We watched him a couple weeks ago get a really big win against Shaw and are just kind of doing their thing there. Tough team to reckon with, a team that can be a real problem for you trying to score points against them with the defensive efforts they've been putting up this season. And then Lakeshore, a team that was there in kind of a back and forth battle with a district foe in Franklinton last year. The winner looked like they were going to get to the Dome. That's the way it ended up for the Demons, but Franklinton got the best of that one. Lakeshore does a great job this year, gets a win against Franklinton, gets a top 4 seed. We'll have a good chunk of this bracket that would have to go through Lakeshore to advance until they got to the semifinals. Potentially would be their first road trip against North DeSoto, but a good core 4 up top and some great teams beyond that. Plaquemine, a 5 seed. I love Bruley, who you talked about before, is a 6 seed. And on down the line, Franklin Parish, another one I definitely want to mention. The Patriots had a historic season last year, brought back a ton of that group as seniors this year. And so Pook Ellis, the LSU commit, Chris Addison, the Michigan State commit, Tavon Bush, Tavon Bell, the Texas State commit. And then they've got a junior running back, Trey Martin, who has LSU and everybody else in the country starting to take notice in him and extend some offers. And then that Franklinton Demons team that was in the Dome last year as a runner-up is the 8 seed, and also Cecilia, the reigning champs, the 13 seed.
Yeah, man. This bracket, you and I have talked, and people can go back to the preview shows we've done in previous years, man. We always talk about Division II non-select being the most wide open bracket that anyone could go and win. We've talked about it multiple years now. Like, I've coached in it. So many teams. There's like 7 teams that could win it, and you wouldn't be shocked. Starting off, like you said, the 1 seed North DeSoto, man, like, what a job Dennis Dunn has done, which shouldn't shock anybody because all he does is win everywhere he's ever worked. He's the one of the architects of the Evangel dynasty in the 90s and early 2000s. He takes Louisiana college football to heights it had obviously never even seen. And so obviously just more of the same. And being from North Louisiana, man, when I was in school, nobody talked about North DeSoto. It's not like they were bad, but it's just like now you're talking about them as like these guys went on the road, Jared, and beat West Monroe this year. Like a West Monroe team that beat Catholic High at Catholic High. You're talking about a West Monroe team that obviously was battling for that District 2 5A championship, and the Griffins handed it to them, man. The Griffins led that entire game. And so obviously that's going to be a really tough one. DeRidder and Eunice, 2 teams that know each other, that have seen a lot of each other in the past, 16-17 matchup. Plaquemine and Livonia, kind of a fun, west side game that you don't get a ton in the playoffs, of teams on the west side of the river near the Baton Rouge area. Livonia, obviously big moment this year, naming their field after Patrick Queen, who's one of my favorite Louisiana football players ever. Except for when you're coaching against him, because I did that once and that was terrible. Coach Donald Williams at Plaquemine, just what a job he's done the last couple of years, man. Like, he's a Plaquemine alum. He was kind of tutored up under some of those really good Plaquemine coaches that have gone on to do other things. Takes over his alma mater of a program and has had back-to-back really, really good seasons. He's a 5 seed this year. They win a very competitive district down here in 6-4A with the likes of West Feliciana and St. Michael and Bruley. Bruley's 9-1. Their only loss, Plaquemine. And so, like, the Plaquemine team is in a really good spot. And they have a really good draw in the playoffs, too. You have a North Louisiana matchup there with Minden and Wassman that should be really fun. Cecilia, obviously last year, Cecilia didn't they win it all as the 18 seed?
Yeah. So last Diesel Solari obviously was banged up at one point. They took a couple losses and came from a lower seed and showed they can do it. And honestly, this year, Diesel and Brent Gordon and some of those seniors from last year have all graduated, Ellis Stewart and company. This is still a really talented and explosive Cecilia team. When they're right, I don't think anyone necessarily wants to see them on a Friday night.
Yeah, and obviously, like you said, Lakeshore, the 4 seed, Brett Indest, another guy like Dennis Dunn, who just wins. Like, he won at Karen Crow, he won at Catholic of New Iberia, and he just keeps on winning. And then number 3, Bell Chase. What a year that Bell Chase is having, man. You have one blemish, and it's to the 1 seed in Division II Select, St. Charles. Anybody that loses a football game to St. Charles should never consider themselves to be not a good football team. A lot of people lose to St. Charles. The 11 seed West Feliciana. Shout out to friend isn't enough. I got to say my brother Terry Miner, who I worked alongside at West Feliciana and Catholic High. Catholic High's OC takes the only job I think he would have ever left us for, and that's to be the head coach at West Feliciana. I'm extremely biased, but of any new football coach, that's the best hire that anyone made in the state. Was Terry Miner was the perfect hire for West Feliciana. The man he is, his ball knowledge is off the charts, man. He is absolutely married to it. But just the human being he is, there's nobody better. And the way he's been able to kind of pick up on the work that Hudson Fuller did and then Devin Ducote did, and then now picking it up and putting his own spin on it. They've got a really good path ahead of them. They're going to face a Bossier team in beautiful St. Francisville, Louisiana on Friday night. And then, hey, Bruley only got them by a touchdown in the regular season in district, and they have a chance to go right that wrong in West Baton Rouge Parish the following week if both teams handle business. And we talked about Bruley earlier, man. Hoff Schooler, just an incredible job with the Bruley Panthers in a really tough district. The Franklin Parish, loaded with talent, put a whooping on Tioga Friday night. A Tioga team that at the time was slated to be, I think, the 6th seed in Division I Select. And they go out and just make a huge statement against those guys. Obviously they are led by an LSU commit, kind of like we talked about Haynesville earlier, Franklin Parish, another small town team led by an LSU commit. Lutcher being a 10 seed, that is so scary for the teams at the top of that higher seeds in the bracket. You don't ever want to face Lutcher when the sun goes down early, when you get to that time of year. And then Iowa at the bottom, a team that I've coached against in the playoffs, always towards the top, but the 2 seed is kind of some newer scenery for them being really that high. I've coached against them when they're, I think they were the 7 seed when we played them a few years ago at West Feliciana. But Iowa, another team that just handles their business. They're not talked about really a ton until this time of year. But another team that just continues to just handle business. But also a team that if they're looking at all at the quarterfinal potential matchups, they're going to have their hands full. It's either going to be Franklin Parish or likely or Lutcher. Now you get it at home, but that don't make it easier when you're facing teams with that much firepower.
Yeah, that Franklin Parish team is kind of the one that starting this season I looked at as my early favorite to go win a state championship or certainly be one of the last teams standing in this Division II non-select bracket. And I think that they drop a game to a Calvary team we talked about. They drop a game to a Ouachita Parish team we'll talk about in a few seconds. No shame in either one of those. And the Patriots have continued to have a great season. And when you mentioned the potential of, a Westphal, if they could right a wrong, if they see Bruley again and some of those dynamics, Franklin Parish had a great season going last year and then ran into Iowa. And so the opportunity, if they could get a rematch there in the quarters, I'm sure that Pook and company for the Patriots would love that opportunity to kind of right that wrong and continue on their path to go try and make some school history. But it will not be easy for them or anyone else in this bracket. North DeSoto is the top seed, and for plenty of reason. That West Monroe game you talked about earlier was the one that kind of opened everyone's eyes, I think, to maybe the Griffins are a whole nother level than they were even being given credit for to that point, which was, already some good credit early in the season. But there are so many teams in this bracket that will be so much fun to watch, and some of these matchups along the way. This has been, and I think this year will again be one of the toughest ones for me to pick when we do get into more predictions during the course of this week.
Yeah, man, and like I said, it's just such a toss up every year in Division II non-select, man. Like if you told me, if I didn't watch a single playoff game, and you told me 5 weeks from now that the 10 seed Letcher won it all, I'd say, yeah, that makes sense. Like, and it wouldn't catch anybody by surprise. Like if you told me, oh yeah, Plaquemine went to the semifinals and as the 5 seed, like I'd be like, yeah, they probably did. Like, if I wasn't watching or paying attention, like it's such a fun bracket because it's so wide open every year. You've got Bell Chase bursting on the scene this year. That's going to add a whole new element to what you're looking at. You have 13 Cecilia and 19 Opelousas, 2 teams that have kind of handled up this bracket for the last couple of years. And you'd say they've taken a step back, but man, we saw last year that for those 2 seeds, it don't matter. And so it's anybody's game in Division II non-select. And honestly, it's the only bracket I think you can really say that in. I think in every other bracket, you can pick about 3 teams that'll probably win it or have a really good chance to win it. In this bracket, like I said, there's 7 teams that you could be like, oh, they won it? Yeah, that makes sense. And it wouldn't shock anybody. I think it's the most competitive bracket in the state.
As much as I sing the praises of Franklin Parish all the time, they open with a 26 seed in Abbeville, who's had some ups and downs this season, had a coaching change early on. There's a lot of talent on that team. They gave Franklinton a battle, a Thursday night game where I went out to Franklinton and watched those guys square off. Jacoby Campbell, a sophomore guy. We were talking about Curtis McAllister a second ago in that 2028 class. Jacoby Campbell is someone that I have up near the top of the 2028 rankings around the state, and he is far from alone. They've got great talent from the seniors all the way down to the underclassmen. And so we look at the potential of can a Franklin Parish Iowa rematch happen in the quarters. Those teams have to get through some tough ones to get there. The potential of a Letcher Franklin Parish second round. Franklin Parish has to get through Abbeville first. And that's kind of the storyline up and down this bracket of don't sleep on anybody early because you can go home really early if you start overlooking anyone in Division II non-select. I don't know if you have more to add to that or you want to jump over to the select side where you mentioned no shame in any loss to St. Charles. St. Charles is back atop their division bracket, the 1 seed for Coach Wayne Stein and company down there in Laplace, and continuing on down the Division II select top seeds, the top 8 earning buys. Loyola Prep up there was 8-0, I guess, until they dropped one to North DeSoto in week 9, and so finished the season 9-1. The 3 seed Lake Charles College Prep that you mentioned before, 4 seed U High, really battle tested, as is number 5 Madison Prep, their district rival. Those 2 teams faced a lot of 5A competition early to get themselves ready for this point. They had another war on Halloween night that this year U High was able to pull out on a pick 6 by Lorenzo Cooper Jr. in the 4th quarter, was the only separation in a low scoring game. Madison Prep, I mentioned, is the 5 seed. The Chargers, Landon Johnson and company, great group. Javen Holmes, Cannon Walker, Darius Mack, and just continuing on down that list of fantastic players there. 6 seed Vanderbilt Catholic. I know one that you've had a lot of fun watching their strides under Coach Wallace and company down there. They had a great season going. We're 9-0, lost a close one with the 8 seed, who we'll talk about in a second, the Holy War down there in the Bayou parishes between Vanderbilt Catholic and E.D. White. Archbishop Shaw, the reigning champion, is the 7 seed there under Coach Hank Tierney. And as I mentioned, 8 seed, E.D. White, Coach Lassane, Grant Barbera, the senior quarterback, a real Charlie Dietrich, the senior linebacker, great group there. They were in the Dome last year against Shaw. Were one of the teams that coming into this year felt like they'd be another one to watch to potentially make a run in D2 Select. And I think even as the 8 seed, they probably are one of those top few teams to be reckoned with. And it's a great group, certainly near the top of this bracket.
Yeah, man, and like you said at the top, like St. Charles Comets, like they're just such a standard in Louisiana football, regardless of classification. Like the work Wayne Stein does just every single year with these guys is incredible. A very well-deserved 1 seed, not afraid to ever go up in classification and go face tougher competition. And so obviously they are well-deserved 1 seed. The St. Michael Archangel Warriors, a local team to Baton Rouge. Coach Zach Leger, who's an alum, keeps doing a really good job there. Obviously playing Loranger in the playoffs is not anything to just chalk up as a win ever. But if they're able to, obviously, like you mentioned, Coach Kyle is saying at E.D. White, another guy who does an incredible job every single year. That's going to be a really tough matchup if the Warriors are able to pull off the first round win against Loranger. Madison Prep and U High in a potential rematch in the quarterfinals. The University Lab Cubs, with just me coaching at West Louisiana and at Catholic High, like played against those guys, coached against those guys a ton. One of the best run programs, really in our state. Andy Martin does an incredible job. They got a Hester starting on the D line. So obviously, I hope the Cubs have a nice run. My little nephew, I say little.
He's not little.
He's not little. He's bigger than his dad ever was, and if anybody knows who his dad is, that's pretty impressive. You got Astruma. Obviously was making a lot of strides as a program, and then their coach decides to, I don't know why, but he decides to become the mayor of Baton Rouge. And so obviously, new leadership there, and then they're going to have to travel up to Shreveport, long way for them to take on the Booker T. Washington Lions. Lake Charles Prep, another team that we mentioned, just so much firepower, 8-2. They had that absolutely insane 70-65 win over Barb in week 2, a game in which they were down one way or the other. One team was down like 3 touchdowns and like came back, and it was nuts.
LCCP was down, I think 25 points and came back to pull it out.
Yeah. They lose week 1 to Westgate, which, Westgate's always athletic. That's nothing to ever be ashamed of. They lose a 1-touchdown game to Catholic of New Iberia. They run through basically everyone else in district. They step out of district in week 9 against a very improved Como team. And they get a huge win against Como. Como has made a lot of strides, I think, in the past couple of years to kind of get their program back in a good place. Vanderbilt Catholic, Coach Brian Wallace, former special teams coordinator at Nichols, has an incredible season. Like you said, 9-0 heading into week 10, wins over John Ehret and Sulphur as 5A opponents. A kind of a program definer for Coach Wallace in a 14-3 win over Lutcher in the middle part of the season. And then, hey, you lose by a touchdown to a really good E.D. White team in the Holy War, which again is disappointing for the Terriers, but it's nothing to be ashamed of at all. E.D. White has had another team. We've talked about a lot of these, but E.D. White's had a renaissance of their program, I think, in the past, 7 years or so. I think ever since Coach Lassane came back, things have really been different for the Cardinals. My first ever coaching offer that I ever got was from Kyle Lassane at E.D. White. Just wasn't in the cards for me to move from Shreveport to Thibodaux at the time. But Coach Lassane's a great dude, does a great job. Archbishop Shaw, right back in the mix. Obviously, coming off of their first state championship since what was it, the late '80s? I think '88,
Yeah,
maybe.
I think 88 is
Right.
correct for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Haynes Academy is the 10 seed. Haynes Academy under new leadership under Coach Sprunk, who comes over from Kinder Discovery. Haynes Academy last year was, I think, the 4 seed. They were undefeated,
Yep.
and they get a bye, and then they lose the first playoff game to an Estruma team who had been playing really well under Coach Sid Edwards, like we just mentioned. And so Haynes Academy with a chance to kind of right that. This year they don't have the bye, but they do have an opportunity in a home game against Abramson to get a playoff win under their belt and then head into a tough matchup with Shaw. And then the fighting Snoopies at the 2 seed, man. Like I tell people all the time, hey man, there's this school with Snoopy on their turf, and everybody's always like, no way. And I love pulling it up and being like, they're a big red doghouse right on the turf. And the Loyola Flyers, man, like what a year they've had. You talk about a team that plays in a super tough district. I mean, you're talking. So Loyola's kind of gone up and down in classification since I've been in school. Like they were a 2A school early on. They were in Calvary's district when I first got into high school. Now they're up in class 4A in a really tough district 1-4A that includes North DeSoto, that includes Northwood, that includes a very improved Southwood team, a Minden team that's always super scrappy, and they get a win over Logansport, who's one of the powerhouses consistently in Class 1A and Division 4 Select. They drop one against North DeSoto in a game that their offense had their way. They just couldn't get a lot of stops against that really good North DeSoto offense. They lose 63-49. Hey, what do? We come back the very next week against a really good Northwood team and Coach Austin Brown, and we get a 1-point win. And so, like, it's an incredible job for a team like Loyola that hasn't been there a lot in these big moments yet. To lose, obviously, again, they would have been their number would have been really high for that game against North DeSoto. You fall short, and you immediately respond with a win over Northwood the following week to finish off that 9-1 campaign. And man, like I know they haven't been there much. I know these kids maybe haven't seen a lot of these playoff scenarios. And yeah, like, hey, if they're hosting Shaw in the quarters, that's going to be really tough. But dude, the Flyers have proved this year that they are really a force to be reckoned with.
This is their highest seed since 2016 when they had the 2 seed. And the benefit there, as you mentioned, they particularly once you get to the quarters, you can have some tough matchups. A Shaw team that, while it looks much different from a year ago, there's some great players on that team that were a part of that Dome team. A Tulane committed senior, Jackson Williams, a junior who's one of the best juniors in the state, Rontre Carter, and a few other guys that are notable on, a statewide and recruiting level, and we're again part of that team in the Dome last year. Vanderbilt Catholic, LCCP, etc. Some others in that quadrant would be potential semifinal matchups. The benefit for Loyola Prep is all those guys would have to come to Shreveport and go up there and deal with you on your home turf with that Snoopy logo and all those things, and dealing with an offense that until a late stop by North DeSoto was right there, just back and forth trading scores. And then North DeSoto got the timely stop to win that thing by 2 scores late. But Bryce Restovich, another fantastic 27 quarterback to watch. Ian Wallace anchoring that offensive line that does a great job of protecting for Bryce, getting the ball out to, his many wide receivers, Ty Walsworth and company. And they can move the ball effectively on the ground or through the air. And so a lot of positives there for the 2 seed Loyola Prep, even if it is a school that folks maybe aren't as used to seeing as a higher seed, along with some of these others. And there's great games right out the gate. I love the New Orleans matchups, the 12 seed JFK versus 21 seed Frederick Douglass, a 21 seed who has a winning record at 5-4 going into the playoffs, the 11 seed Carver against the 22 seed Livingston Collegiate. That Livingston Collegiate team beat Carver in the regular season. Livingston won a playoff game in the first round last year. And so that's not a 22 seed that is going to shy away from anything or go down easily against Carver in that playoff opening matchup. And then as the bracket continues to shape up and you start to see the potential of, can you get, obviously a Madison Prep U High would catch a lot of attention here in the capital area as well as around the state. If you see those two kind of perennial powers square off again. If you get the potential of a St. Charles and an Edie White or any of those quarterfinal week, it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, man. And God, I'm already just looking at how many run plays would be run if Edie White plays St. Charles in the quarterfinals, man. You talk
We'd
about
be out
two
of there
teams
quick.
with, yeah, no doubt. You're not looking at a long one if those two get after it. But man, Madison Prep and U High in the quarters, if you just go back and watch that game, 14-8, U High pulls it out on a pick six, an odd game, man. Madison Prep's lone touchdown is a punt return for a touchdown by their quarterback, which not many perennial powerhouse teams have their quarterback returning punts. And then U High gets the huge pick six, 75 yards late in the game. Madison Prep isn't able to put a drive together. U High survives. Talking to some U High people after that game, they were just, kind of in awe at just the size and the athleticism of the Madison Prep Chargers. My older brother said it was the biggest O-line they faced all year. And so obviously a rematch there is going to be incredibly physical. Obviously it's easy to highlight the guys like Lamar Brown, who's the top player in the country. And obviously there's studs on both sides, but man, that game's probably going to be one up front again. It should be another really tough physical game up front, knockdown, drag out. Maybe comes down to, hey, whoever has the ball last or whatever defense makes that really big play. And I feel like you've seen that 2 years in a row now when those two have gone at it in the regular season. Madison Prep gets the best of them in 24, wins the district title. U High gets the best of them this year, wins the district title this year. And so kind of the rubber match for those two teams potentially on Thanksgiving week to kind of settle a lot of animosity between the two programs. Obviously, a lot of respect also. I was told, my mom came down for that one to watch my nephew play. And my mom was talking about how physical of a game it was. Mama Hester knows ball. And so she was telling me how physical both teams were, and it should be another really fun matchup. Vanderbilt, Lake Charles Prep, potentially in the quarters. This has honestly some of the most fun potential quarterfinal matchups of any bracket. If you look at just those top 8 seeds. But there's some teams that are going to have some things to say about those top 8 just getting an easy path to the quarterfinals. Like you said, John F. Kennedy, one of the tougher 12 seeds you'll find, just loaded with athletes. Laranger, I think, is going to give St. Michael a really tough first-round game. Northside and Landry in the 17-16 matchup. Northside's got a ton of athletes. Northside plays in a brutal district with STM and Turlings and Westgate. So them being 17, I don't think shows how talented that Northside Vikings group can be. And so this bracket's going to be a lot of fun, but you probably do expect a lot of those top 8s to be the ones there on Thanksgiving.
Glad you mentioned, some of those teams and some of those guys that you just talked about. Northside has done a great job of kind of bouncing back from some down years. Coach Jacardi Carter and company have done a nice job. Mario Alexander, Jai Joseph, some of the seniors on that team of just kind of bringing that thing back. LB Landry is a team that just surprised JFK with a win in week 10 in a battle. And so that 16-17 matchup is one of the better, more intriguing 16-17 matchups we've talked about so far. And you talked about the U High, and we'd spoken so much about this bracket and hadn't talked about Lamar Brown, the highest ranked senior in the class in state, one of the highest ranked in the country, a guy who's headed right across the street to LSU for college. And they've got great talent, two-way linemen, him and Mason Smith and Jordan Pinnock, who's headed to Lafayette for college. Man Moses and Aaron Moore, and we mentioned Lorenzo Cooper, and just a ton of talent in the secondary. Lane Mixon, linebacker, Lawson Dixon, one of the weapons on offense there with Sage Ingram and Corbin Odell, the running back duo, all against that Madison Prep team potentially. If we get there, it would be a Thanksgiving rematch of the Halloween night game. And so the two teams with all that familiarity and animosity just doing kind of their holiday get-togethers if they do get to that point in the third round of the playoffs. But moving on up, man, Division I non-select. I know I've been watching people in the comments talking about some of the 5A schools since we got started. And so appreciate everyone certainly tonight that's tuning in. A lot of, go ahead.
Before we move on totally from Division II, this is just really quick. Lamar Brown is a huge human being. I just want to throw that out there. If you have not seen him in person, he's terrifying.
And
going in,
the athleticism at that size is unreal.
He plays like tight end half the time, and comes across and some of the biggest people I think I've ever seen in pads. I remember J.J. Watt in person. I went to a Texans game years ago against the Jaguars. Calais Campbell. I think those are probably the two biggest people I've ever seen in pads in person. And Lamar Brown is enormous. U-High always has big kids, but he makes his teammates look small. And so before we move on from Division II, I want anybody to know that if you have nothing to do on a Friday night in the Baton Rouge area, just go see how big Lamar Brown is and go check that kid out, because he is honestly such a physical monster and really good at football, really athletic, but just one of the biggest human beings you'll ever see.
I asked him about that kind of more of like an H-back role and stuff they were doing with him after the game where you guys at Catholic High played them and went over to their place and got a win. And it obviously was a tough night for the Cubs that night. But when I asked him about that opportunity and the flexibility that gives him to move all over the offensive formation and put dudes in the dirt, he lit up a little bit there for just a second, talking about how much fun he was having.
The big body people are changing the game in football, man. You look at how athletic some of these kids are. EA has who's the kid
Bryson
EA?
Bryson Martinez.
Dude, they got him playing quarterback in these Wildcat packages. He's one of the top tackle recruits in the country, and they got him playing quarterback. Dude, it's insane how athletic some of these big men are. It's almost like watching a really good power forward playing basketball. You're how can a dude that big move like that? And I think Trent Williams kind of started a lot of this, with the things that the 49ers get him to do as an H-back. I think teams are realizing, man, hey, let's sub in our sixth O lineman and take our best O lineman and have him just split zone and crack somebody on the backside. It's insane what some of these big cats are doing nowadays.
And we're going to talk about that EA team and Bryson Martinez, the LSU committed offensive lineman / giant athlete here in this Division I non-select bracket. Starting at the top of the bracket, though, Ruston, the Bearcats, trying to get back to the Dome again. They were champions a couple of years ago. They were runners-up a year ago and 3 years ago, and so trying to continue that run of New Orleans trips to end their seasons. They were able to come out on top of that crazy District 2-5A that came down to two simultaneous games on Friday, and any one of those four teams could have ended up district champions by the end of it all. But Ruston gets the win. The 2 seed Neville, the other team that finishes the regular season with a district win in that 2-5A group. The game that I was at on Friday, they get the best of Alexandria. Destrehan, the 3 seed there. We got one of their stars, Jabari Mack, who's been in the chat a little bit tonight, another member of that LSU class. He wanted to shout out the Wildcats earlier. Thinks they're going to go make the run and win the state championship, and he wants to also give some love to his classmate heading in there to LSU, Lamar Brown. Lamar Brown is the man, says LSU commit Jabari Mack. That 3 seed with Jabari and Jalen Ash and Jackson Fields and company. Deuce Richard, the La Tech committed defensive back, and on down the list, the Collins brothers, the bookend tackles for the Destrehan Wildcats, Malachi Dabney, the junior running back, who's been doing some great things there. They're the 3 seed. A tough Denham Springs team, the 4 seed. I think that's the one that for a lot of folks around the state, if they were trying to project, okay, who are going to be these top 4 seeds, who are going to be the teams that have the buys in Division I non-select, folks wouldn't have been expecting Denham, but they've taken care of their business. They got another big win Friday night, or I think it was Friday night, against Sanamaw. Coach Brett Beard and company doing their thing, the Goldman twins out there in Livingston Parish. And so that's your top 4 seeds, the teams with the buys. But this is another one that the bracket is loaded with great teams. The other two 5A teams in there with Ruston and Neville. West Monroe's your 10 seed. Ouachita's your 14 seed. That's a 10 and a 14 seed that I don't think a whole lot of people want to see this time of year with the seasons they've had. Despite some of the losses Ouachita's had, it's been just to that loaded district with those guys in Alexandria. And yeah, I mean, let's get into it because there's an awful lot to unpack up and down this bracket, all over the seed lines.
Man, earlier in Division 4 non-select, select, we basically said it was District 5 versus all y'all. This feels like District 2 versus all y'all in the Division 1 non-select, man. Like, what a year Ruston's had again, like playing a not quite a national schedule like an IMG would play, but man, like, you play all these Texas opponents, you play a team like Acadiana, and then after you do all that, you go and play in the most competitive 5A district in the state. Like you said, 4 different teams had a chance to win that district on Friday night. And then you have Ouachita, who is terrifying. Like a Ouachita team that 3 of those district losses are by combined like 9 points. And then they lost by, I think, 2 scores to West Monroe. I think that was the one team that got them by double digits. Everybody else, it was by – they probably should have beat Ash a few weeks ago when Ouachita and Ash ran into each other. I honestly, just from a fan standpoint, I was kind of hoping Ouachita would not get a home game because then they'd be like the scariest road team of anybody in this first round. But they do get the home game against the Santa Maula team, who's battle-tested in another really competitive district down here in District 5A. And so this bracket, man, is just like when you get to the Division 1, it's like, where's the bad game? You know what I'm saying? Because, like, man, like, you have number 8 seed Southside, who Jess Curtis, like, what a job he's done there, very fast. But then they got to face a Prairieville team that might be the best 5-5 team in the state. The Prairieville Hurricanes in their second year of existence. Under Coach Schmidt, who's a Catholic High alum, guy who kind of comes home a little bit from Colorado, like I mentioned earlier, to coach the Hurricanes. Won 3 straight district games in a really tough district. Obviously they fall to Denham, who eventually, and they fall to Santa Maula. But they, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Prairieville beat East Ascension, who won that district, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, they did.
And then like locally, man, like, hey, Central and Dutchtown, like, let's go, man. That's a great local matchup in the Baton Rouge area. The potential of Zachary and Denham Springs in the second round, 2 teams that know each other. They used to be old. They've had a lot of time against each other. I want to say they scrimmaged each other here either in the spring or in the fall scrimmage, one of the two. Might have been the spring. So it's 2 teams that saw each other early on. East Ascension, the 12 seed, West Ouachita pulled off a big win last playoffs against Denham Springs in the first round. Now they're having to travel down to East Ascension, a team, like you said, led by an LSU commit, who apparently can do everything. He can block, he can play quarterback, the Spartans have done a really good job this year, man. Coach Brock Mathern, who's been really good to me. We play them at Catholic High every year in freshman and JV to open the season. It's our second year doing it with them, and it's great competition for both of us. It's good to see him just on a personal standpoint have success. The Destrehan Wildcats, the 3 seed, get a bye, a team that Catholic High played in a really, really tough week 1 match, 2 years in a row. Week 1 last year, you were there. I was there. It was the most uncomfortable physically I've ever been in my entire life. There was like tremors under the turf, with all the rain. This year, luckily, a lot more of a dry contest, but another great game between Catholic High and Destrehan. Man, Destrehan better be on the lookout, man, because if Ouachita wins this first round game, you're facing a tough Lions group in round 2. Granted, it's at your place. It's a long trip from Ouachita to Destrehan. But man, the Lions are a scary team. Like, they might be the scariest like teens seed in any bracket just because of what they've been through. Ouachita could be a top 5 seed if like 10 plays this year go differently for them. Think about, they had opportunities to win 3 of their district games that they lost. Hahnville, another really good year for Hahnville. And like we said, ended up being a really competitive district with them, Thibodeau and Destrehan. The Parkway team, who has the blemish on their record against Evangel. Northwood, who plays in that 4A district with North DeSoto, but because of the way they shake it, plays in the Division I playoffs. West Monroe, a team that came down and beat a Catholic High team, in the middle of the season. Or no, sorry, we had to go to them this year. All right, so, obviously gets a big win over Catholic High in the middle part of the season. A really interesting 15-18 matchup. Thibodeau and Mandeville, that should be a really, really good game. Lowell Narcisse, first year at Thibodeau, his second, maybe, or third total year as a head coach, including his time at Ascension Catholic. I think you're going to hear his name come up a lot if any notable jobs come up in the state in the next couple of years. Obviously, he's extremely young. He was an extremely, as you know, maybe better than anybody, Jarrett, an extremely talented prep quarterback in Louisiana. Had a great college career. That's going to be he's doing a phenomenal job at Thibodeau, a team that has really not had much football success to talk about in the last couple of years. And then, Neville being the 2 seed. We talk about District 2 versus all y'all. Neville, potential West Monroe rematch in the quarters. It's one of those things that this Division I bracket creates is these really fun potential matchups. Man, Zachary and Denham, like I said, potentially in round 2. The Zachary Broncos, I think they got some stuff that they feel like they need to prove to themselves and to the rest of the state. They had some blemishes on the record this year against some good teams, but make no mistake, Coach Brewerton didn't forget how to win big games. Like he didn't, him and his staff and his kids, they did not forget how to go kick butt on Friday nights when it matters. And that 13-seeded Zachary is scary for some people. If they're able to get past the Salmon Trojans group, or Spartans, sorry, and it was something with a helmet. The Salmon Spartans, Zachary and Denham, man, that's going to be standing room only out there in Livingston Parish 2 weeks from now. This bracket's fun, man. Like you look at just so many fun potential matchups. Westgate Airline round 1, like that's going to be fun. That's going to be a lot of points scored, defense optional type game, I bet. And then like the potential of Central to go against Dutchtown and then EA in back-to-back weeks, like is just kind of a cool Baton Rouge matchup that you don't see all that often, especially in playoff time.
There's so much in this bracket that it's almost tough to even know fully where to dive in because there's so many great teams. There's so many great matchups right off the bat. So many great potential matchups as this thing goes on. I do think that District 2-5A, those 4 teams from there are kind of 4 of the core teams to watch. As you mentioned, Ouachita Parish, even as a 14 seed, Coach Benji Lewis and company have viewed this team as like a dome potential type team. They've got the big guy, Dylan Berryman, who just decommitted from Texas on the defensive line, but Wydell Clark, the speedy all-around athlete, Montreal Connor Jr., continuing to come on as an athletic quarterback and just, great size up front, great athleticism outside and under center or, at quarterback, and can play with anyone. And they've shown that they can play with anyone. And so I think that whole group is going to be really interesting. There is certainly the potential of, Ruston versus Neville or Ruston versus one of these district opponents making it on through. I think, Neville and probably the same, I was at Neville, but probably the same story for Ouachita and West Monroe Friday night as they watch this all kind of come into place. They're looking at the bracket and saying, why do we all have to be on the same side of this thing? Why do we potentially have to end up linking up again in the quarters or whatever it may be? But Destrehan, we talked a bunch about. They've been as consistent of making deep runs as anyone in this bracket in recent years, and they have a good senior group. Again, certainly dangerous to go put some points up in a hurry. The Baton Rouge group that you mentioned and kind of that quadrant, not the Ruston quadrant, but the Ruston half of the bracket up top where you have the Central and the Dutchtown and the EA and the Zachary and the Denham. I think Coach Brewerton as a 13 seed that everyone's kind of either sleeping on or kind of piling on a little bit and saying this isn't a great Broncos team. He's probably loving every minute of it because he's one of those coaches. He's one of those coaches that through the years has kind of nudged me and almost wants me to pick against them at times because he eats that up and loves to use it to fire up his Broncos. And so it hasn't been the traditional Zachary year thus far, particularly the way some things went in district, but they're not going to be an easy out, whether it be against Salmon in a rematch of a 2023 playoff game, or if they get to go face their former district rival in Denham Springs before Baton Rouge kind of shook up the district alignments in 5A a couple of years ago. And as great a year as Denham has had and as down a year by Zachary standards as Zachary has seemed to have, I don't think Denham – I'd say that. I don't know that everyone in Denham wants to see Zachary. Brett Beard, I think, has the same kind of attitude as Brew, where he says, go line it up like we'll play anyone, and he'll feel good about that and have some fun with that competitively. But Central is a 5 seed, the reigning champions from a year ago that people didn't think was going to go make that run last year. And so while it's a new look team this year, they're certainly capable of going to do it again. That EA team, the kind of Avengers superstar coaching staff that they pulled together, going and getting Dane Chaponchier and company, just kind of continuing to fill out that staff. Dennis Skanes coming over from state champion Cecilia, and some of those new coaches were some of the ones that realized, hey, this big tackle we've got, we bet he can go throw some touchdowns, run for some touchdowns, catch some touchdowns, and do all that for this offense. And so what a job those guys have done. Saw some folks asking about Southside, Jess Curtis and company doing a great job down there. Their first season with their home stadium, and they're making folks proud to go watch them on Friday nights. They just beat up on Karen Crow in week 9. I think it was 70-35 final score. Was kind of a flex of what they're capable of when things are going right. And if you give them any chances, they're going to, sort of give them an inch, take a mile sort of thing. They'll run right over you if you give them that opening to do so. Terrebonne, another team that fantastic offensive line under Coach T.Y. Lewis. They're a team that views themselves as kind of a under the radar, dark horse, Cinderella type. Can we go make the dome type team? And it's all predicated offensively, at least, with they've got an offensive line that can match up with anyone. They've got running backs and Quincy Bear Adams, who is a bowling ball that has just run through people all year, and Alvin Celestine, more of kind of the lightning to that thunder that is one of the top senior running backs as well. And then, Westgate, talented as anyone, a little bit younger than some other folks, but talented as anyone, facing Airline, Kenny Darby, an LSU committed receiver, and on down the line. We have a lot of Salmon involvement in the chat as well tonight, so shout out to those guys. They will travel again to Zachary in the first round of the playoffs, a rematch of a 2023 game a couple of years ago in the playoffs. They've got great running back in Jimmy Chansey. They've got a versatile wide receiver and all-around athlete in Terrence Mitchell, who's been one of the top touchdown scorers so far this season, and they have some big wins under their belt, and they'll head up to the Corral on Friday and see if they can add another one.
Yeah, so going back, man, that Ouachita team, so I was right. It's 15 total points in 3 losses to Ash, Neville, and Ruston. 15 total points. You're talking about a totally different outlook of how they're viewed by the rest of the state if a few things go different. They lose to West Monroe by 14. You mentioned Jess Curtis and Southside, man, 2 blemishes on their record. They lose week 1 to Notre Dame, who's, like we mentioned, you can't say enough good things about the job Louis Cook has done for a really long time at Notre Dame. Them being a top 2 seed in their bracket, and then they lose a 3-point game to Acadiana in a game where passing is optional between Southside and Acadiana. But they respond, like you said, that they've scored 70 and 65 points in their last 2 games as a response to that tight loss to an Acadiana squad that a team we'll talk about in the select side that nobody wants to see as a 14 seed. But man, there's so many teams in this Division I non-select that could just make runs similar to Division II non-select. Games, teams like a Southside, like a Central, like a Zachary, like a Ouachita Parish that could be playing on Thanksgiving, even as a seed in the teens, and it wouldn't really surprise anybody. And so it's going to be highly competitive, like it always is. I feel like being the last man standing in a Division I bracket is definitely something to be proud of, especially when you have those districts like District 25A that are just so dominant this year.
And, a great point by Southern Jag or SU Jag 20 about Zachary as well. They beat Acadiana and Karen Crow earlier this year.
100%.
So
yeah, no doubt.
While they had that tough stretch against Liberty Central and Catholic, they have won some big games this season. A good team overall that is going to be interesting to watch from that lower seed than we've typically watched them come out of. And we've had some questions about Natchitoches Central as well. I don't know as much about the Chiefs this year, honestly. I do know that they're 6-4 and that they started off a little bit of a slower start because they opened district with a run of the top teams in this year's district with Evangel, Captain Shreve, and Parkway, but they got back on the right side of it, finished strong, won 5 of their last 6. The only loss in there was Airline, and so they come into the playoffs with a little bit of momentum coming out of that tough 1-5A, where certainly tough in terms of opponents that can put up points on you in a hurry, and now they'll have to take the long trip down to Terrebonne and face a team that is probably not going to sling it around quite the same way as Evangel will, but they are a tough matchup to deal with and try and slow down that Terrebonne offense. Any more to add before we jump on over to Division I Select?
Yeah, don't sleep on the Natchitoches Central Chiefs. Coach Brad Laird, they score a lot of points, so they're going to be a tough out for Terrebonne.
Yes, indeed. Good to see Coach Laird doing well there too, man. Obviously, a challenging couple years for him, but someone that I've known a long time, back to when his dad Billy was the coach at Ruston, and I was up there at the News Star covering those Bearcats. And so, glad to see what Brad's doing back at the high school level. Wrapping up with Division I Select, one that we finish with because it's one of the big school brackets. It's one that always is as loaded with, great matchups and great teams as any. And this year, the storyline is kind of Carr got back to the mountaintop last year and looks as good, if not better, this year. And who is going to go challenge them? And, can they possibly pull off the first back-to-back undefeated seasons in Louisiana for the first time in a while, since I think U High did it a few years back, was the most recent example of it. But the way it shakes out, some of those top contenders end up on their half of the bracket. And so looking at that D1 Select group, Edna Carr, again, an undefeated team in the regular season, just got through that Catholic League with a win against Rummel on Friday. They're the 1 seed. Turling's Catholic, great job by a guy we know well, and Mikey Corville, first-year head coach there with the Rebels, doing some great things. Alex Munoz and a great senior class there that I know Mike has been so excited about those guys and the way that they've bought in and kind of taken leadership of that program. They're the 2 seed, an undefeated 4A team that got back on the right side of that rivalry with STM a couple weeks ago to continue on that undefeated run through the regular season. St. Aug, Coach Robert Valdez and company, the 3 seed. They're the second team in the standings coming out of that Catholic League behind Edna Carr. Gave Carr the closest game anyone in state did all season, which was 42-21. Says that much again about Edna Carr this year. But the 3 seeds, St. Aug, who we'll talk a bunch about, I'm sure, here shortly. You guys over there, Catholic Baton Rouge, the 4 seed, the team that has given Carr as much trouble as anyone in recent years. We end up, it seems like, every single year with a quarterfinal or semifinal battle between Edna Carr and Catholic. This year, it would be the semis if both teams are able to reach that point. 5 seed Alexandria, the team that made the Dome last year to face Edna Carr, they end up falling down to that 5 seed with the loss against Neville, and so we would potentially have a Catholic Alexandria quarterfinal again if we get there. The 6 seed Tioga, who we talked about a little bit earlier, really strong team this year. The 7 seed John Curtis Christian, who was right there among kind of the top group in the Catholic League, again was a young team last year that had some ups and downs, made a semifinal run as a double-digit seed. This year they're the 7 seed with a first-round bye. And the 8th seed, the Evangel Christian Eagles, Pop Houston, that explosive offense we talked so much about earlier on, much improved in terms of trenches and defense this year compared to last year, but that's still obviously a challenge for any of those 1-5A teams once it gets playoff time and you're facing the Catholic leagues and whatnot. That is your top 8. And much like Division I non-select, there are great teams well outside of that top 8, but that's kind of, I guess, where we start is that core group with the first round buys.
Yeah, and when you go outside of that, top 8, 14-19, Acadiana and Caracrow, two teams that just played, going right back against each other. Again, a district rematch. Two teams that have obviously that probably get tired of seeing each other because they obviously. And so Acadiana and Karen Crow playing right back again. Obviously it was a super, super tight game that came down. I think Coach Corville was actually telling me about it. I think Acadiana threw a pass to the end zone with about 30 seconds left, something like that, to take the 21-14 lead and take that one. And then
I don't remember. I don't know how that one went. I do know that this is the third time in 4 years that they have to play each other early in the playoffs. And so I texted buddy Dustin Arnold out there with Acadiana and said, man, it's so sweet of y'all that the times that I don't get a chance to catch Acadiana, Karen Crow, y'all make sure to play it twice so I get a chance to catch the rematch. So I'll go see those guys on Friday.
I think they're becoming the new Curtis Evangel, where there was like a 9-year stretch of Curtis and Evangel playing in the playoffs, whether it be the semis or the dome. Like they can't stay away from each other. Rumble and Holy Cross, another Catholic League rematch. Rumble obviously always really dangerous no matter where they're seated. That's another team outside of the top 8 that I think can give people trouble. St. Thomas More, one of those 4A schools that gets bumped up to Division I for the playoffs. They obviously had a couple of bumps this year. They lose to Catholic High early on. They lose to their rival that they've kind of controlled for the last however many years against Turlings. What a job that, Coach Mikey Corville has done. You talk about that game, and then overall, like down 14-3. In previous years, would a Turlings team have been able to respond against STM down 14-3? They score 35 unanswered points, and they kind of just dominate the 3 quarters of that game. I can't say enough good things about Michael Corville. Mikey, in 1 year at Catholic High, became one of my very best friends. Was really tough to see him go. But another thing, kind of like Terry Minor, like there's only probably one job in the world he would have left us for. And for him, it happened to be his alma mater needing a new head coach. He goes in with our full expectation that he's going to crush it. And then he goes 10-0 in his first season with wins over Notre Dame, wins over STM, who that had been the hump they couldn't get over for so long. He's the 2 seed there, done an incredible job, leads with passion, leads with heart, does it the right way. Another one of those 4A schools that gets bumped up is Tioga. Obviously, Tioga had a really tough week 10 against a really good Franklin Parish team, but they're still the 6th seed. They still get a bye, and they're, welcome to the Division I playoffs. They probably get Rummel in their first playoff game. Who last year we squeaked out a 14-7 quarterfinal win over at Catholic. Captain Shreve, a little bit of a lower seed than what we've seen them. They're usually around that 16 or up the last couple of years. Now they're 20. They got to make a long trip down to Hammond. Hammond had a really, really good season in a very competitive district. Lost to a really, really good St. Paul's team. Was able to finish the season in a positive way. Brother Martin and Liberty, man, you talk about, a scary 21 seed in the Liberty Patriots. Obviously had the huge win over Zachary. Their running game can get really, really electric. If you let their run game get going, it's scary. Coach Jimmy Zachary in his first year there won a state championship at Opelousas, looking to bring some stability and some of that fire to EBR at Liberty. And then, like you said, Evangel's offense, like, man, points. And like you said, like we talked about them earlier with LCA, like what happens to Evangel when they run up against a really good defense? Like, are they going to be able to get the stops they need to give their high-powered offense as many bites at the apple as possible? so that Pop Houston can really just do what Pop Houston was born to do, which is score touchdowns and lead offenses at a very high level. It's kind of the Carr versus all y'all type bracket,
Yeah.
but there's teams there that can definitely make incredible runs. There's teams that can push Carr, I think, and make them earn a return trip for them, which isn't very far to the Superdome. Um, but it's an incredible bracket, just like the non-select side. So many teams could make runs to the dome. Ash is certain to be right back in it. Catholic High right back in it. It's good to see Coach Valdez doing so well at all. He's just one of the good guys, I think, in the state. Um, he's always had a lot of time for me whenever I've needed something from him, even though he's never met me and has no clue probably who I am. But every time I've ever reached out to him, Jarrett, man, like he always comes through for me whenever I ask him something or need advice, just from one of the guys that's highly respected. It's good to see him in the Purple Knights, where they belong. I think any Robert Valdez team belongs at the top. And then the Curtis Patriots, man, like a 7 seed, them and S-Team in the second round. That's a really cool matchup to potentially look forward to. A potential STM Turlings quarterfinal rematch. Obviously, it's going to be not an easy road for the Cougars to get there, but this bracket also has some of those kind of fun rematch possibilities that we've seen.
I think watching this bracket come together, that the city of New Orleans is essentially just chomping at the bit for can they get a Carr Og Dome matchup. And I think if I look at the bracket right now, that those teams are probably favorites on their respective side, and that's certainly a possibility. But as you mentioned with Carr, there are going to be really good teams along that way that are more than capable of kind of throwing the curveball into that potential of a potential Carr and Og rematch there. Two of the great teams and great fan bases around the state, but there are several of those type of great teams, great fan bases in this bracket. And so it'll be interesting to watch the challenges that come along and how in tight moments on, whether it be next week or whether it be Thanksgiving week or early December or whatever, what kind of challenge gets thrown their way and how do they respond in a key moment once that weather starts getting cold, and all those things fall into place. But this is one that I feel like in recent years, I've kind of ended up spending more playoff time on Friday nights at Division I select games than other brackets. As much as I try and even it out, I just tend to realize, okay, well, I was going to go to this other division this week, but how can I possibly pass up this matchup? And I think there's the potential for a lot of those matchups happening here really quickly in Division I select. You talked a lot about these teams. You mentioned that Hammond and Captain Shreve game that I'll give a little shout out to as well. If we hadn't ended up with Acadiana Karen Crow, where I will be Friday night, that's one that I was kind of eyeing the potential of Captain Shreve coming down to Hammond. Hammond's had a nice season out there. They are 7-3 to wrap up the season. Got some good talent from the senior class on down, doing a great job out there. And Captain Shreve with Jamarche Plater, one of the top running backs in the class this year, if not the top running back in the class, a one-time Wake Forest commitment who backed off his pledge. And so for college coaches out there, he's back on the open market, one of Louisiana's top uncommitted seniors right now, looking for his home at the next level. One that I think folks out there in the Hammond area should definitely go check out that game because it's one of the more fun first-round matchups to me around the state. We've got some shout outs about Liberty Magnet and the step forward they've taken this year. You mentioned Jimmy Zachary and bringing some intensity and passion to that program. We knew when that hire was made that was a certainty that he was going to come out this way and bring some fire back to that Patriots program. And we've certainly seen it in them getting some big wins during the course of this season. St. Paul's another team that we haven't talked as much about, a 9 seed, good senior group, really good talent at every class. I really love their sophomore group. Andrew Schofstall, the linemen, RJ Payne and Christian Martin, a couple of the DBs and just talent all over the field, again, from the senior class on down to that 28 group that I love. I'm not even going to talk about Jesuit. I know you won't be able to pass up the opportunity to talk about them a little bit at some point, but you quickly, as you start to talk about this bracket and look up and down the bracket, once you say something great about one team, the other one catches your eye, and you realize there are a lot of capable competitors in Division I Select once again this year, as always.
Yeah, man, and like you said, like some of these early on matchups, like Jesuit McDonough 35. You don't get a ton of inter New Orleans matchups in the Catholic League in round one. You get a lot of them in the quarterfinals, where a lot of these Catholic League teams find each other again. But McDonough and Jesuit round one, Rummel and Holy Cross round one. Some of those New Orleans matchups that we normally don't get until later. Riverdale Bonneville, that's another one at the bottom of that bracket. That's a local matchup. I want to say those two just played in week 10, if I'm not mistaken.
Bonneville got a win on Friday.
That out. Yeah. What happens when they go against each other again? The rematches are always so hard to predict, especially when the first game is so close. You feel like it could just be flipped by just a couple of plays. This bracket is just every year, just so competitive, so fun. It's fun to coach in. It's fun to watch as an outsider. There's going to be some first round matchups. I think there's going to be some first round upsets in this bracket. I really think there will be. I don't think it should surprise anybody if Liberty gives Brother Martin a really tough game. I don't think it should shock anybody, obviously, if Karen Crow flips the script from a week ago and gets a win over Acadiana. Can Coach Wagney at Holy Cross get those guys revved up to play the Rummel Raiders again for the second time this year? Another guy who has always been good to me and does a great job. Captain Shreve has a long trip down to Hammond, but man, they've seen some really good offenses in District 1-5A and Airline and Evangel, and they're a good offense in themselves. It shouldn't shock anybody if the Gators go down there and handle business. I think you're going to see some really competitive early round matchups, first round matchups, games that you might think until they go final. As far as trying to predict this bracket, and then round two in this bracket gets uber competitive very quick.
A couple of notes on, a couple of those teams again, as we kind of start to wind some of this down. That Bonneville Riverdale game ends up being, Bonneville opened it up to a 34-12 win, but notable about that Bonneville team this year is they started 1-3 and then have won their last 6 games to get to this point, one district. And like some other teams we talked about, Andre Anthony is their first year head coach as a young guy, former Miller McCoy, Edna Carr, and LSU standout who, did a little professional stint after his college days in Baton Rouge and is now getting back, to his hometown and is a young coach trying to pour into the kids that Bonneville Bruins program. And they're, on a heck of a run thus far now heading into the playoffs. And so great job, Dre and company. Trying to look at a couple of these other ones. The Acadiana Karen Crow matchup that we'll kind of continue to come back to. They've got on the Acadiana side, the LSU committed defensive lineman Darius McKinley, who was the younger brother of LSU standout Dominic McKinley. And so for folks that are looking for opportunities to see some of these future LSU Tigers before they head off to the next level, that's a guy that we haven't talked about much yet in this show, but is someone of note there. And then on the Karen Crow side, you've got Chance Babineau, the Nickel State commit, who has just been everywhere for the Golden Bears his whole career as a 4-sport standout and a guy that set receiving records early in his career and then passing records when he took over at quarterback. And now as Carson Gursey, the young quarterback, has come in and taken over and allowed Chance to go do more of what he does. He's been one of the top receivers in the state statistically. He's been one of the top DB. I think he's got like 10 interceptions, 8 or 10 interceptions thus far this season. On defense to go with like 10 touchdowns or whatever those numbers are on offense. And so he's been kind of Mr. Do-It-All in a way that you don't always see at the 5A level. We talk more about those type of guys with the smaller schools, but one hell of a season he's having. We got a question about St. Paul's, who, again, we just talked about Mason in here in the chat. Might have just missed it a couple minutes ago, but that's a a good team, a 9 seed there that has some great senior leadership and some fantastic young talent. Just listed off some of those guys, but that's the team that has a favorable first round matchup with Pineville having to come down. And then I think is a really interesting matchup that second week going up to Evangel that it's tough to compete with Pop and company, particularly having to go up to Shreveport. But that's an interesting second round matchup to me if St. Paul's gets there.
I think the word for St. Paul's is just physicality. It's just the way they play football, man. Like, you are going to hear pads popping when the Wolfpack is playing. Coach Sears and them do an incredible job down there. I'm good friends with their offensive coordinator, Kenny Sears, who's the son of the head coach, obviously. And man, St. Paul's is just so physical. You're going to see some contrast whenever they in that Evangel matchup, contrast in styles. And you're going to wonder, like, hey, can Evangel hold up against a really physical team like they saw in Lafayette Christian a few weeks ago? A team that obviously can score points but can just play stifling defense at times, which they've done against some really good teams. They held a really good Hammond team to just 12 points when those two met up a few weeks ago. Really one of the big style contrasts I think you'll see is that St. Paul Evangel potential second round matchup. But the Wolfpack can hold their own, man. Like, nobody should assume anything about them having to go all the way up to play Evangel. Obviously, Rodney Duron Stadium, very, very tough place to play. All right, they got that pretty new turf there that's been there for a couple of years. They got a big-time quarterback committed to LSU. They have as much history as really anybody in the state from the early 90s to now. Teams like Kentwood and John Curtis and Haynesville, like, they all had a big jump on Evangel as far as when they started playing football. There hasn't really been when you talk about the teams that have been most successful in our state from the 90s to now, you have to include the Evangel Eagles, who have won, at least 10 state championships off the top of my head just since the early 90s. Most of those under Dennis Dunn, but 2016 they get a big one under Byron Dawson. 2009 they get one under John Bachman Sr. So they've won state championships under multiple head coaches. Denny Duron's at the helm now, who's kind of the guy who started the whole thing way back in the late 80s in Shreveport. Is the man in charge now. They've got some alums on staff. Josh Alexander, who was a killer linebacker for them back in the day, played at ULM as their defensive coordinator. Spoke with him a lot this week. They feel really good about their chances to make a lot of noise in the playoffs. And so St. Paul's, a team that everybody should be paying attention to for sure.
That's 14 state championships for Evangel. The top teams, John Curtis, who we didn't mention, but they're in this bracket with pushing toward 30 state championships at this point under
good?
JT and Comp. Yes,
Is
it's
that,
pretty
is that
good.
a lot? Okay.
when you can win, twice as many state championships as like the age doubled by your players on your team, like, you're putting up. There was a point, I don't remember the exact stat dynamic, but it was like if you were a John Curtis Patriot, you had played for a state championship like every year, every other year or whatever at worst for decades there, essentially.
I think there was a statistic where every football player from 1975 to, I think it was like 2008 or something, graduated with at least one state championship ring.
I think it's into like the mid-teens was how long that stretched into.
I know Evangel got him a couple of times there in the like 08, 09 under John Bachman Sr. And then they had a little bit of a gap before they won another one. That might have been when the streak ended.
Yeah, so they had a gap between 2013 and 2018 where there might have been some unfortunate guys that graduated in like spring of 18 that missed it. But
only a 5-year stretch of no state titles. What a long stretch.
But those guys topping the list, and then Haynesville, who we mentioned earlier, the top public school championship count with 17, and then Evangel there at 14. And so two of the top three, as we saw years back, are in this same bracket again. Some more love for Coach Sears there from Mason as you were talking about him. Mason said W teacher and coach. We had I assume this is a business. We had a question from Bayou Booty, Louisiana Treasures, about Kinder, who we talked about earlier in their division bracket, one of the undefeated teams in that Division III non-select. And so a lot of people will look at Gina, Sterlington, St. James as kind of the trio to beat in there, but Kinder and ERAF, two undefeated teams there that obviously have won a lot of big games to get to this point and will be worth watching. You wanted to react to Bayou Booty, Louisiana Treasures.
What do they sell there? I'm just curious.
But yeah, it'll be interesting to see that they would have to potentially get through. If they could get to a semifinal, it would be a semifinal matchup with Gina, a 1-4 between Gina and Kinder. But again, Kinder's having a heck of a season thus far heading into the playoffs. We've talked a bunch up and down this bracket, and we keep kind of dancing around. Essentially, Carr is the team to beat. They're tough. We haven't gotten into a lot of the specifics about them or what makes them so tough, but coming out of the spring, there were college coaches there for the spring game at Destrehan that said they looked like, potentially a college team, like an FCS team, maybe at the high school level. They have, as much as we talk about some of these LSU commits all over the state, they've got one on the front end of that defense right in the middle, Rich Anderson, who most teams probably have to double or triple or do anything they can to keep him from wrecking your offense. Right there at the point of attack. And they've got the safety on the back end, Aiden Hall, who flies around, gets sideline to sideline, can ball hawk a little bit, but is as physical as just about any safety in the state. Certainly up there. He and y'all's guy, Blaine Bradford, are two guys that at that safety position, no one wants to be hit by. And those are kind of the headline prospects, particularly for Louisiana fans, but there's talent everywhere on that team, particularly on defense, but on both sides of the ball. Trey Garrison, the running back, just flipped from Nicholls State to Washington State. John Johnson, the quarterback, building off of the great junior season, now having a fantastic senior season with an entirely new wide receiver core, at least in terms of the top end of that depth chart this year. And everybody is looking great. They're moving the ball well. And, if they take care of the ball, they're tough. But even when they don't, the defense is so stout that it almost doesn't matter at times because they are extremely difficult to sustain much consistency against moving the football.
Yeah, and look, I'll say it for him because he'll never say it about himself. But as good as their kids are, because they are, you got to have the Jimmies and the Joes because they're the ones that go make the plays. But I think it all starts with the fact that Bryce Brown is just an incredible football coach, man. Like, and not just that, he's an incredible leader of men. Just the fact that he's able to be so consistent. You don't get that lucky with just good players that often to win that often. It takes some incredible coaching by him and his staff every single year. Everybody that talks about Coach Brown says nothing but great stuff. Leads his program with integrity, coaches a group of kids that are obviously uber athletic and so talented, and they always go off to, big time colleges. And, it's always a big deal. Signing day at Edna Carr is basically, they could charge admission. But
hey,
I think
don't give him ideas because look, Bryce. I saw Bryce a week ago, and he said right now they're planning on a 14 early signing in December, and they'll stream it. I'm sure. He said he knows they're going to have to trim the speeches down so it's not quite so long this time, but they may be getting to a point where they'll put it in an arena and start charging some ticket prices, and I'm not ready to pay him, so hopefully I get a media pass.
Car signing day from the Smoothie King Center is coming in 2026. No, man, but I just as a coach, I always want to make sure we highlight the kids, but you got to highlight the coaches.
Yeah.
Like I said, a guy like Bryce Brown, just so consistent, does such a great job, and I think it starts with him. As good as the kids are. If you don't have the right man at the top, we've seen a lot of really talented football teams in every level of football that don't reach their potential because they don't have the right guy at the top. And obviously Edna Carr has that, and it's clear as day to see by everybody that watches them. And Coach Brown does a very, very good job.
I'm glad you said that. That's something that I'm hoping that in the next week or so I'll get a chance to chat with him about to kind of feature some of where they are heading into the playoffs. And that word consistency is so huge, because this is a team that was an undefeated state champion a year ago. And we see all over the state how tough it is to go repeat as state champions, because A, it's tough to win one in general. And then B, when you're dealing with high school kids, they can very easily get satisfied or just not quite be the same level of locked in or hungry. And this team has been as good as they've been all season. They have been hungry and somehow keep that chip on their shoulder. And I mean, just tackle that process day in, day out, week in, week out the right way. And that's why you see them not only winning every single week again in 2025, but in most cases winning pretty big, and putting teams away early and playing up to their potential. And I mean, you just watch their whole operation getting there and how orchestrated everything is, and everybody's where they need to be. The game ends, and those guys are lining up behind Big Rich and company on the line, ready to hear that whistle and march their way out of the stadium, to a point where when you're New Orleans media, it's kind of a, I don't want to say joke, but like a little smile moment of like, all right, who do we have a chance to try and get in the 2 minutes it takes from them to finish this game and be on the bus, because they're regimented as can be. And that's a credit to Bryce and to that coaching staff.
Yeah. When I first started off coaching, Coach John Bachman at Calvary told me, when it comes to state championships, like it's really hard to get there, and it's even harder to win it. And I think it's got to be dang near impossible to go back to back. And the fact that they, were able to do that, they've had so many times where, they were a few plays away. What was it in 2020 of winning 4 in a row?
Well, they won 4, and then 2020 would have been the 5th. Yeah.
Would have been 5th. Yeah. So, like, you won 4 straight state championships. Like, if you go back and look at how many times that's been done, now, you got to talk about the Curtises and teams like that. Evangel did it in the late 90s. 2 of those kind of got vacated from them because of an ineligible player playing, which, as a kid that was at Evangel at the time, still counts to me, but, I don't read the record books. But like, their ability to just be so consistent, like year in and year out, so regimented, like you mentioned, it's a real testament to the job Coach Brown does. And, everybody should just, should fully expect Carr to make another really good run, and be a tough out for whoever they play.
That run from 2016 to 2017 was one of 7 times in the history of Louisiana football, which goes back, like a century, that we have LHSAA stats. I'm looking at some that were like back to back in the 30s and whatnot that are on this list, but one of just 7 all time that have won 4 consecutive state titles. 2 of those instances were John Curtis. 1 was Evangel. And 1 was Haynesville too, who we've talked a bunch about. Also shout out to LCA and Faraday, who completed those jobs at different points. LCA just a few years ago, 2017 to 2020, Faraday back in the 50s. But if something is only happening 7 times in the history of Louisiana football, it's pretty impressive company. And we have more from Jabari Mack, our buddy there at Destrehan, the LSU commit. Carr back-to-back, definitely. I approve this message. So Jabari is ready to go win a state championship on the non-select side, support Big Rich and Aiden and company, his buddy Greg Wilford, his old Destrehan teammate on the select side, and then he'll head off to Baton Rouge. And then at some point, I think he's practicing the run for office and getting his political ad messaging down.
Yeah, man, Jabari's a great player, and Destrehan's going to make another run on the non-select side, and he has every right to believe that Carr will make another deep run for sure.
Anything else you want to add? We didn't talk a ton about Catholic. Mention that they've given obviously Carr as tough of battles as anyone through these recent years, and I think it's another Catholic high team that there was a point where y'all lost a couple of games kind of midway through the season, close games to West Monroe and MRA. And I think at that point, because of how short the attention span is for folks, people kind of looked, okay, well, Catholic lost a couple games. Let me look elsewhere now, and don't know if this is the team that goes to make a run. But you guys have really nice defense that has been a lot of fun to watch the times I've seen y'all. Good offensive line, anchored by Blaze Thomasy, the Stanford commit there. A gang of running backs in the backfield, like 5 guys I think y'all feel comfortable putting in there at different points. A couple of quarterbacks y'all feel good about. Jude Chamberlain, the fantastic tight end, who is now becoming just a versatile piece on that offense. And so that's a team for you guys over there at Clay Cut that I think is capable, as always, of competing with even the Cars of the world on any given Friday night.
Yeah, and like you said, our kids did a really good job of responding to some adversity there in the middle. You have 3 really big, really emotional wins to start the season over Desterham STM and University Lab, and then you have a couple slip ups, and that happens. That happens to great teams all the time. We played some really good football teams. Madison Ridgeland is considered by some the best team in Mississippi, period. West Monroe, tremendous football program. Coach Dizer had a tremendous first season there. I think he's only going to get better. Our district is wildly competitive, and we were able to kind of refocus, kind of determine what kind of team our kids were able to determine really who they wanted to be. And they were able to respond in a really good way. And, we're looking forward to what comes next in November, December for sure.
And we all are looking forward to what comes next in November, December with all of these 8 great brackets around the state. 5 more weeks left, 4 all over the state, and then 1 in mid-December in Caesar Superdome. So we are certainly looking forward to getting to that point, but looking forward to how we get there with some of these great matchups all over the state, starting certainly this Friday night. I haven't seen any on Thursday yet, but there might be a couple that get scheduled for Thursday night. But make sure you stick with us throughout the playoffs. It's going to be another fun postseason.
Yep. Get your butt out of your house on Friday night and go watch football. Man, go support these kids. Even if you don't have a dog in the fight, Catholic High's got to buy. I'm going to a football game Friday night, man. I'm going to watch some ball. I haven't determined where I'm going to be yet. But man, y'all ain't got nothing else to do. You don't need to watch Love is Blind. You don't need to do whatever it is people do on a Friday night, because I'm usually busy. Man, get out. There's a local game happening where you live, I promise you. And these kids work really, really hard. And if you say you love football, hey, man, LSU and the Saints stink. Go watch some really good high school football. All right, there is one happening near you. All right, and you need to go check it out. All right, get off the couch.
Yeah, this every week when I do my college roundups and players of the week and whatnot, I say, it was another tough Saturday around the state, but Friday night there's always highlights, and we have 5 more weeks of highlights to look forward to. I was glad that you gave what has become kind of your traditional message at the end of all of these shows of telling people to get the heck out there and go support these kids and programs, because they work their tails off year round, and now we're down to the crunch time of a year's worth of work being put into this, and really years, plural, worth of work being put into this for all these guys to go chase state championships. Again, he's Chance Hester for Louisiana Football Report. I'm Jarrett Roser for Louisiana Versus All Y'all. Appreciate the 1,000+ of y'all, it looks like, that have tuned in. Thanks as always for checking it out, and get out there and go to some of these games. Looking forward to doing so myself.
Yes, sir.